call the meeting of the Next Generation School Building Committee to order. Ron, you want to do the roll call, please?
Sure. Sean Kimball. Here. Sarah Stevens Morling. Jeff Solon. Greg Rosenblatt.
Here.
Chris Daddy. Here. Megan Rockwell.
Here.
Rich Gussenberg.
He's there, but I don't know if he can hear us.
Okay. Oh
Are
yeah.
you hearing us?
Hear us, I don't think he's on.
I was muted here.
Okay.
And Chuck Knapp. Here.
Okay,
And Dennis Ryu. Thank you.
yep. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, nobody from the public here, so I'm assuming no public comments. And correspondence, Sarah's not here, I don't know if anyone else, do we have any correspondence? So then let's move on, motion to approve the minutes of June 8th.
So,
Okay, second? Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in,
We
is that,
finally figured out Rich's last name.
Oh,
Rich was the one that,
oh yeah.
all in favor of approving the
None of
minutes?
these,
yeah.
Opposed? Okay, unanimous. Brings us to the architect's update. Justin,
So-
you guys, town council meetings, or whatever order you guys want to go.
So I'm going to respectfully request our mechanical engineer has been hung up. He's attending in person. The bulk of this conversation is regarding the MEP systems. He's going to be late to this meeting. So I would respectfully request if we
Sure.
could take the OPM and the construction manager update
Mhm.
first.
Okay, sure.
This is, trust me, this part of the discussion is gonna be the bulk, this is a longer update and a longer meeting, so.
Substance.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the owner's rep. Okay, is the, I guess, a review of the financial procedures.
Yeah, so we had passed those out, I don't know if it was the last meeting before that, for review, and I know that there was probably a review by the town attorney. I think they made some modifications. I didn't make copies, but I know that Rich had distributed to everybody in their packages. Basically, we're asking for approval of those procedures at this point. So it's approval for the processing of invoices, monthly requisitions by the construction manager, and then of course the change order process and then the state reviews.
Okay. And people on the committee, have we looked through any questions for them on the procedures? Okay. And we can either approve them one by one or just approve the entire package. Any feel on that?
well, I would move for the entire
Entire
package.
package?
There's no pass, we can take them up one by
Yep.
one.
Okay, so I'll take this, a motion to approve the financial procedures dated June 12th, 2023, as proposed by Arcadis.
So moved.
Yeah, Rich.
Excuse me. Yeah, the last one that we sent out was dated June 13th.
June 13th.
Yeah. There were a couple of changes after the June 12th.
Okay.
I think the only two changes that were made between the June 12th and June 13th was the fact that there were a couple of places where it said that items would be sent to the secretary to be included on the agenda, and instead that was changed to items sent to the chairman to be included on the agenda.
Okay, very good. So approval of the June 13th financial procedures. Second? Second, all in favor? Opposed? Yeah, Rich.
No, I was voting yes.
Oh, okay, yes. Okay, unanimous, including, okay, so the financial procedures are passed unanimously.
Okay. I think next item on our agenda is invoices?
Yes.
Yes, okay, so I did pass around a package for the invoices. There are 3 invoices, 2 from Tecton and one from Arcadis. The Tecton invoices are for 20% of the schematic design phase, which we are in agreement with. So those are on the agenda. And then Arcadis's invoice, and of course we bill hourly, so we have one invoice. We're going to bill for both projects also, but the way our accounting system works is we have to have our signed contracts in place before we can actually open up jobs. We were able to open up one with an interim compensation with a minimum amount because we hadn't gotten our contract. So we've been billing our hours to the Norton job until we get the contract.
Okay, very good. Any questions for Arcadis and Tecton on the invoices?
Rich, just a question, as these are voted on, should they be voted individually or each of the three?
Each of the
or four
three invoices separately?
Yeah, I think so,
Should they be
because
voted on as a package?
well, I think that we should probably vote these individually just to start, and then we can confirm whether or not we want to do individual as we move forward through the weeks and months. But
Okay.
this being the first one, and there's only three, I think we could probably take action on all three of them. So.
I just wanted to know for sake of record keeping for the state and that sort of thing.
That's a good point. Yeah, I think you're right. So that they're in the minutes. So for the new Norton School, we have invoice number 46385 from Tecton Architects in the amount of $76,025.
Move approval.
Okay, motion to approve, and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Second invoice for the Norton Elementary School is for Owner's Representative Services. That is invoice number 343-70105 in the amount of $1,490.72.
Motion to approve?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Unanimous, okay.
Okay, and the last one is for the new North End Elementary School. Invoice number 46384 from Tecton Architects in the amount of $88,308.
Motion approved, second. All in favor?
Any question?
Yeah. Okay.
Well, actually, this is, I'm sorry, this is the, this is still for tech fund. Never mind, I'm good.
You do, that's it, okay. Any further discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Okay, thanks.
So,
Oh,
Yeah, no, go
question
ahead.
if I could.
Yeah.
I'm not understanding the second bullet.
on the first page?
Yeah.
Okay, so Emily Cifuentes, our financial controls manager, went through the format for Tecton's invoices. She works with the state on a regular basis. She handles all of the audits at the end of the projects. So she wanted to make sure everything was lined up. And so she went through the format. I think she worked with Jeff and with Martha in your office to get the invoice put together. What she found out is that when the building committee took action for Tecton's contract, it was for all of the basic services, schematic design, design development, so on and so forth. It did not include the cost for the reimbursables, and it did not include the cost for any allowances. So what Emily said we needed to do is we need to obviously have an invoice format that is consistent with the action that the building committee took and that the town council actually approved. So that's where we're at. What we're trying to do is to identify, what allowances we need in the future, but also that the reimbursables were not included with the base contract. The curve on that one also is that the contract, as it was written, says that, and if you'll see in the third bullet down, reimbursables. In reading the contract, Article 11, it states that reimbursables are in addition to the compensation for basic services. So that's where we're at with adding on to the basic services. But there's a contradiction with the Article 12 that says that total compensation for the project shall not exceed $4,109,640, including reimbursables. So there's an inconsistency there. We need to get that worked out, so that, so that we can, move forward and have the reimbursables on the invoices.
All right.
Right.
And now,
if I might. Rich and I did talk about this today. I don't think that it's, a major issue. I think it's just something we need to clarify. Obviously, the intent always was to accept the cost proposal that Tecton had given us initially. And so it's just a matter of we need to talk to our attorney and make sure that we're okay as far as the state is concerned in what we're doing. So we'll take care of it, we'll clean it up by the next meeting.
okay, we can defer that to the next meeting to clear up the language.
Yeah, it doesn't affect the invoices
Okay.
at this meeting.
Very good. Any other
Question on
questions for-
the Arcadis invoices, it's all going to the new Norton Elementary School, so how do you break that up?
Correct. So, we're tracking it in our system. We make note as to, what we're actually working on. So we'll be able to break it up when we do open up the new North project in our accounting system.
Gotcha. So right now, this project master schedule, that's for both projects?
That's for both, right.
But you just put it on the Norton?
We did,
just kinda
because we
keep it out?
don't, because we didn't open up a project for the new North End Elementary School. We just opened it up for Norton. We haven't gotten our signed contracts back yet, so our system doesn't allow us to really open up projects. But we were able to open up for interim comp with a small value, just so we can get started.
Any other questions for Arcadis? Will that be reconciled?
It will be reconciled, yes.
And are we, it's very early in the process, but we're on budget, or we're?
We are on budget,
where we
yes.
should be?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next, so we've approved all three of the invoices. The abatement RFQ, I guess this is through Tecton, Arcadis, we able to do anything on that, or are we, I guess that's something you're gonna tell us, or give us some guidance, or
Right.
is that something we want to defer to the town attorneys here, or?
No, what we spoke about at our last meeting was that the three of us would get together, make sure that the content, the scope was correct, and then send that to the attorney.
Okay.
And we have some examples of typical scope. We have, who's gonna take the lead on this? It doesn't matter to me.
We can get together.
Yeah, so I guess the takeaway is by the next meeting, we should have, I guess through the chair, submitted a draft scope of work
Right.
to the attorney for their insertion into the RFP.
Okay, good. And that's bringing us almost down to the end, except for
We can
you
start.
can get started on your things.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you all. Craig Raza from Kohler Ronan will be here, but we have enough stuff to go over in the interim. So in the hard copies that you have today are our standard kind of 1 to 2 page summary of the work that's been completed and kind of the status. We've also included our meeting minutes from our working group meeting from June 13th, which is the sustainability strategies, as well as the slide deck that was part of that meeting. And I know the chair had also sent this to members of the committee for your review. It's a pretty robust and technically oriented presentation, so when Craig gets here, we can kind of go through some of the items. We also included, this is not to scale, but we include copies of the surveys that have been completed, so we're marking those in the site surveys in the work completed category. In terms of, yeah, go ahead.
Just on the site survey, some other due diligence that's coming up once we kind of settle on general location of building is the geotechnical borings and analysis. So there was a conversation before the meeting with the design team members and CMR about putting together a boring plan. So our goal would be, and I wrote it down, our goal would be to try to get a boring plan mapped out for the coordinated with our group for discussion at the next, just review at the next meeting. So that, now that we have the survey done, that's the next step. The geotechnical is gonna tell us basically what's under, what's in the ground. So,
Are these drawings available PDF somewhere that we?
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah, we can certainly send it.
Or just put them where you're putting all the other documents?
Yeah.
In the Google Drive, the
You've got
Google
a
Share Drive.
drawings folder that you
So,
can.
so everyone here has access to that shared drive.
Yes, that's correct.
Awesome, that's great. 'Cause that's where we are putting a lot of our material. Okay, in terms of traffic that is kind of going in concert with our site plan development, we're currently coordinating some of the items like parking quantities, bus parent queuing data. We have some current assumptions that were part of the original traffic report for the north end from SLR, but also some extrapolations to Norton. And all these are in the process of being validated with Jeff and Vin. So north end, we're looking at approximately 150 staff and visitor parking spaces, a 14 bus queue, and an 80 parent queue, which includes a separate queue for early childhood. And when we get into some of the diagrams for the site, you'll be able to see that. For Norton, our baseline currently is 135 staff and visitor parking, a 12 bus queue, which includes 10 large buses and 2 small buses, and a similar 80 parent queue. So those are kind of the baselines that we're looking at, and we're trying to validate, especially in the staff and visitor parking quantities. But that's what we're using in our current planning assessments. We did meet with the town council last week for a town council update as part of our presentation, Arcadis and OMG, so it was the first time the council had seen the 3-headed monster that you have assembled here. So all in all, generally positive feedback from the councilors. Some comments relative to safety and security. That's one of our upcoming working group meetings. And also a lot of discussion about recreation fields at the school sites with the specific request about what about ball fields, understanding that there's a perceived need, there's likely a need within the community to tie some of these structured ball fields to these school projects. So we listed that as an item for discussion for the building committee. Some of our initial site development plans, you'll see the approximate sizes of some ball fields as they appear on the site. As I mentioned, our working group meeting number 5 was the sustainability strategies, and we will get into the presentation that's on the screen now. But so what I'm going to do is, we're really going to treat this as the crescendo, but no. We wanted to just get into some of the, oh, there was a question?
Yeah, before you get into sustainability stuff, you say you're gonna do more borings for the sites for geotechnical? So there's like 5 borings done back in 2021 or whatever,
Yep.
the north end.
Yep.
Those not sufficient? Why do we need more?
We would like to, once we know the location of the building, we'd like to take more around the building, more around where we think the parking is going to be. And prior to this meeting, we had discussions about taking some more so that across the section of the site, so they understand the makeup of.
Yeah, particularly any storm drainage areas, detention areas, any utility entrances and paths to the building. We probably want to identify those like those locations.
So, yeah, it's a good question. I think the 5 was kind of like high level to get you started. We have those on our record, and our design team has them. I'm sure you guys have them as well. But typically we like a lot more because site is a huge variable when it comes to some of the costing. So
It helps better define rock, where rock is.
Yeah.
So you're not interpolating. If you don't have enough data, you're either overpaying in the base bid or not paying enough. So it's better to know.
We planned on it though, to do these borings?
I'm sorry?
You'd already planned on doing like borings and the cost?
I gotta look to see what we had in our, what the sites that run in our contract or the scope.
it's cheap money.
It is, we agree that, you know, more is better when it comes to site borings.
About how many would you typically do on a site this size?
You know, I don't think 20 is out of the question.
That was the number that I was gonna suggest. So some of the things that we can ascertain from tying a more extensive boring analysis to the actual building footprint and position on the site is that we'll be able to get a better understanding, not just of rock, but groundwater elevations, unsuitable soil elevations. Ultimately, the geotechnical report will give us a fairly reasonable picture of what all of those areas are. As Laurel mentioned, this is kind of like where the biggest risk is in any type of project, is what's happening under the ground. So you can never have too many borings. We've all had projects where we've done 20 borings, and the one spot that we didn't take that boring, that's where a nice big dome of ledge is, right? So it's, the more the better. And that also includes areas where we may have underground detention, you know, anything that's underground infrastructure, we want to make sure that we're taking borings in those areas.
So the geotechnical engineer, I guess I'm asking this, even though it's going to sound like a statement, but that's a member of your design team? That's a component of your design team?
I'm pulling it up now. I don't remember off the top of my head if it is or isn't.
Because whether it's good money, great money, or the best money ever, it's taxpayer money. So, and we've allocated a certain amount, so we need to know wherever there's a dollar that's not included that we
Yeah.
think is.
Yeah. It's part of the due diligence process that I think is, you know, is a wise way to, you know, to know more before you put a shovel in the ground than when the shovel is in the ground and you've got to scramble.
Not disagreeing with that.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is who's paying for it.
Right.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of things that are great, but the well only has so much water in it.
That's right.
And we've allocated a certain amount for design, and I'm just trying to understand whether this is,
Yep.
that's part of the financial due diligence, if you
Right.
will.
Yeah.
Is what
Agreed.
I'm asking.
Correct.
Well, okay, so Craig, we had mentioned Craig was on his way. Craig from Polarone, I think you've all met him before, but why don't you introduce yourself again?
Craig Raza, partner of Cola MEP, engineer, IT, AV security, whole gamut for both projects.
Thanks for coming.
So we can start at the beginning of the presentation. So I guess I'll ask the pleasure of the building committee. And Rich online, that I'm starting at the beginning of the PDF presentation that I had sent you this afternoon. So we have broken out the slides, the pertinent slides that were part of our working group meeting last week. And Rich had sent them to all of the committee members in advance. We can do this one of two ways. We have the slideshow up, and it's 30 to 40 slides. We can go through it in the presentation that we gave last Tuesday, or we can hear questions from the material and then toggle to the slides in question. So I guess I would ask, in the interest of everybody's time, what would be your preference for how we go through this?
Go through this
Go
now.
through
What I
slide by
hear.
slide, so
Okay.
what I did at town council.
Great, okay. So we started our, so Craig's already given this presentation twice. So we started with some of our high-level sustainability goals, tying them to the vision statements that we had created as part of our think tank sessions. So, you know, as we had mentioned, as part of those summaries, you know, this is really our touchstone or our baseline for what we keep coming back to. So a lot of things about, you know, for every child within the community, and fostering spaces that are fun and safe for mind and body. So very much so, some of the sustainability goals kind of tie into that. And Craig, I don't know if you want to take it from there.
Well, these are items that I actually pulled out of the ed specs, as well as things that I think are important There may be others, but these were the, what I gathered from my review. The low energy use, I think that's important for any project which leads to good energy efficiency. Proper indoor air quality for your students, for the teachers, etc., to promote good learning as well as an inviting environment, fresh for everybody there. Adequate daylighting, bringing natural daylighting in promotes better learning because you're relying so much on artificial lighting in order to make the space comfort. Accurate coverage, temperature control, good even temperature throughout. I say this, code drives most of the decisions. And what I say is the new adoption of the building code and new energy codes really makes a lot of decisions for us, what we have to do as a minimum, and then we can enhance on top of that to make betterments. But a lot of these things we have to do anyway. Building materials, the use of proper building materials to build a good envelope, tight envelope, an efficient envelope. And your school is actually a teaching opportunity, not only for the teachers to present to the students, but your students to learn from the building. I think that's really important of how we really put these buildings together from a sustainability approach.
And I know that's something that the superintendent has certainly keyed into in some of our initial conversations, is finding those opportunities within the building where the building can be a teaching tool for some of the curriculum.
And actually, if we use geothermal or photovoltaics, energy dashboards could be little projects for students to play with and learn and to monitor through the school year and things like that. They may be familiar with this, but it's very important, systems versus envelope. And your idea is to provide a efficient envelope and a better system as a balance. Because you can provide a super insulated envelope and a terrible system to get a good EUI, but it's not going to be responsible. And over-insulated building is not the better because you're not putting your money where it's actually necessary. So there's a balance that we want to achieve early on to make sure that what we provide is going to not only provide the efficiency we need, but also provide a more inviting and better equipment.
Could you give a little more explanation for what the envelope encompasses? I mean,
Well, the
I heard that
envelope-
fairly quite a
okay.
bit lately.
So the envelope is basically your exterior skin of your building. It has your walls, your windows, skylights, your roof, your floors, your foundation. That's the envelope that the building you live in. Okay, it's an energy producer. It stops energy from coming in as well as energy from going out. So the idea is to make sure your envelope is good, not so you're stopping so much natural daylight coming in, but also just reducing the amount of energy that's going to be introduced from the outside into your building. So one, gives you better thermal comfort, and also reduces the amount of energy you're going to use in the building, means smaller systems, etc.
And that extends to both thermal mass or thermal performance of an envelope, but also the tightness of the envelope, or
Correct.
the when we say tightness of the envelope, specifically air tightness of the building.
I think that's what Justin is a very important point, air tightness. The building will get a blower door test, both buildings, when they're about 90% constructed, to prove what your tightness of your building is. Okay, and why is that important? These old leaky buildings, they leaked. Drafts in the window stuff, you don't want that. Infiltration is one of the biggest problems you have to overcome in mechanical. So if you can control that, you don't need to put as much system in, you don't have drafty spaces, and your environment's going to be a lot more comfortable for the individuals that are in there. So it's very important that the envelope really be looked at early on to set the goals, to allow natural daylighting and to reduce our overall energy consumption without, again, breaking the bank. And how do we do that? Walls, roofs, glazing, etc. Proper U and shading coefficient. The next slide.
So sorry, Craig, if I can also so this is an example of where the commissioning agent also has a part in this. They review these type of details, and some of the common comments that we as designers have is, make sure, really don't see where the air barrier is within this assembly, make sure that it wraps to the sill, or you have a thermal bridge here, so make sure that there's insulation. So that's really part of Cheshire's advantage to having the commissioning agent on at this phase of the project, which I know you guys are going through.
So on our project, can you just explain to us how you decide you know, okay, we can meet code, or meet X, or break the bank, or how do you know what's your approach? If the approach is to meet X as a standard, you know, in your experience, I think when one of the buildings we toured, you had some special kind of concrete or something, building exterior, you know, those things make the building better, but there's obviously a cost. And how do you guys balance that, or do you just, code says we need to do X, or you just stop there?
Well, no, it's a collaborative event. ONG can look at some cost comparisons of different components to see. Us as the design team look at it from an energy point of view, an energy model, and of what's going to be the best bang for the buck. If you have to go from, if we go from an R30 to an R38 roof, so what is that additional 1.5 inch installation cost to the project? We know easily what can gain to the project by doing that. Anything going above 38, 40 or higher is really a cost of diminishing return. It's not even worth evaluating. So we want to look at those things early on to confirm through both cost models and energy models to see what the best approach is.
All right, so if code says 30, you're not just going 30, you're going to evaluate, and
30 is
who
bare
makes that
minimum.
decision, I guess? Is,
30 is bare minimum. So we're going to start with that, and you always increase from there. See what's the best approach for the project.
Yeah, I believe the new school that we're working on now, it just concluded design development. We had a more robust thermal performance in our insulation. And that was part of a conversation in schematic design of understanding, you know, we're about ready to get into a conversation about EUI. So, you know, understanding what that EUI is with the mechanical system that we've specified, what better performing thermal envelope does to that EUI with the mechanical system. So it's kind of like, you know, it's ballet, or it's a dance. You know, that one dance partner, this is a horrible analogy. So I'm already realizing it.
There's no turning back.
Yeah, so it's, you can't have one without the other, okay? You can't achieve a good energy, a good EUI without marrying the thermal performance of the building with a mechanical system that's heating and cooling the space inside.
And it's more than just that too. It's kitchen, it's plug loads, it's everything.
no, I understand. So let me ask it in a different way then. You know, when you throw a project at somebody, typically they say, all right, what are my requirements? What am I supposed to design to? And you say this, and they go ahead. Need whatever, or just the high performance standards, or they want high performance standards, but they also want LEED gold, or whatever it is. So have we made a determination as to what our minimum design standard is? Is it simply the Connecticut high performance standards, or is there something higher that we're shooting for as a starting point to evaluate budgets?
Well, I think we can have that conversation. I think some of that direction needs to come from this table.
Yeah.
Because the fortunate thing, as Craig alluded to, is that our current energy conservation codes have a high, it's not 10 years ago where there was really a low threshold for building performance. We now have a high threshold, so even code minimum gets us beyond Connecticut high performance building requirements. So depending on how far we want to target that EUI, I think is a goal and a direction that needs to come here.
So the decision hasn't been made yet?
No, we're going to present some EUI options. We've ran some preliminary models to generate the numbers that are coming up in the screen, then the types of systems. So without giving away what we're going to talk about, we'll get into that in a little bit.
When do you need a benchmark from us? Like how, I mean, sooner the better, or 6 months out, or 2 months out, or tonight?
I think tonight would be something, but after what you see, I think you'll answer your own question. And driving some of these decisions doesn't have to happen tonight, but we want to reach a consensus of where we're trying to go. We're trying to give you an efficient building, but how we're going to get there wants to be a kind of a class. I can explain to you all these different things I'd like to design for you. Everybody's got to be comfortable with it, and you're going to live with it after we're done. So as we go through, you'll kind of answer.
And we'll understand from your, the cost from your presentation tonight.
Cost?
No, I hate to make a decision if we don't know.
Not necessary. Your construction costs won't be discussed tonight. It's more about some different goals and options that would be considered.
Okay.
So the other thing that I'll just mention is we have met with facilities to kind of understand what it is their likes and dislikes are from an operational standpoint within the district and what has been successful for them in the past, what they struggle with. So we're utilizing that information. You know, there's a concern that if we're not talking to the facilities group and only dealing at this level, that there's gonna be a disconnect. So we're trying to marry the two as we.
So that gave us a backstop.
Yes.
That conversation was a two-hour-long conversation on Wednesday that we went through all the various different systems that we see here today. They said what they like, what they have, what they don't have, their experience. So that gave us a good baseline to start from. And then we also obviously have recommendations on what we've seen, what works as far as a balance, and that's what we're gonna propose. And then tonight, and then you'll see options tonight. You don't have to say, oh, you need an R42 in the wall tonight and an R60 on the roof. That's not what we're looking for. We're looking for general consensus that, you know, like Craig said, your general consensus, you're gonna see the answer in the information that we present through it, so.
And I'm gonna be issuing some more. I had 51 bullet points that came out of our meeting the other day, so we'll discuss some of these as we're walking through this. But just one important thing about, you know, shading, daylighting, overhangs, etc. The idea is to reduce the amount of transmission or solar gain coming into the building at certain times of year. You know, the sun angle is very high during the summer. Overhangs will help eliminate or alleviate some of that penetration into the building. But during the winter, you want that more, that nice warm radiant effect to actually penetrate deeper into the building as the sun angle is a little bit lower. But, you know, properly placed sunshades is very important to reduce the overall energy consumption. And they can be made attractive and fit into the architecture of the building as well.
This is also kind of a low-hanging fruit example of how a building can help be an educational opportunity for the students. You know, the different sun angles with our solar shades in the exterior window of a classroom at varying times within the school year is a very easy lesson to have with the students.
And the nice thing about the envelope and, you know, shading like this, these are passive strategies. So there's no maintenance that go along with it once they're put in. It's set and forget type thing. And it's always a constant performing attribute to your building without any maintenance. So this is an excerpt out of your ed spec for the project. And it talks a gamut of different types of systems, both fossil fuel based and electric decarbonized type based systems. Decarbonization means no use of fossil fuel. So based on this, it's open to types of systems that can be explored. And we set up our presentation to discuss fossil fuel options and all electrified building options, and as we kind of go through this stuff. Some of the other important things from the ed specs, you know, other than, you know, centralized type systems, possible geothermal. One of the things is hydronic perimeter heating. Granted, hydronic heating for kindergarten, pre-K, I agree 100%. If they're going to be on the floor quite a bit, it's nice to give it a nice warm environment for them. So I think that's definitely something worth considering and putting forward. Perimeter heating, with the new buildings, the new envelopes, and the tightness, it's one of the first things that's actually considered not to be installed in a lot of new buildings, a lot of new schools. One, because the building envelope is so good, the heat loss through the building envelope is so low that you can do a more traditional approach of air systems without putting the additional hydronic system in place. But again, something we'll discuss as we go through some of the options. Okay, for that. So fossil fuels versus decarbonization. There was no goal either one in the ed specs, but both kind of are touched on a little bit. And the decision of what we do here is something we want to do together. We can kind of guide you along the way and kind of educate what it means. So this is fossil fuel alternatives, and I base these systems based on the EUI. Those of you who don't know what an EUI is, energy use intensity. It's the amount of energy a building uses on a square foot basis per year. Okay? The lower your EUI number, the more efficient and the less energy it uses. The higher, the worse. code minimums are in the mid to upper 40s. So to give yourself a range of where some of these options are, gas-fired RTUs could be in a range of 30 to 40 EUI, depending on what you do and efficiency, heat recovery employed. But they're very close to a standard traditional baseline system. Not a lot of high energy efficient on it, but they're cheaper first cost, and not a lot of maintenance goes with them as well.
So Craig, just, I wanted to ask this question during these presentations, but just for a comparison's sake, kind of a typical 1960s elementary school that's currently being replaced, if you could hazard a guess of what, say, an uninsulated masonry building with gas-fired hydronic system or whatever, a conventional.
I wish I had, because I actually have a slide for how the codes go down. I don't have it in here. But the EUIs of those old buildings, when you started to condition, were above 100.
Yeah.
You know, so they've come, and you look at progressions of year for codes have done. Think about energy for lighting. Lighting reduces 10% per year for every code adoption. That's what they do. Mechanical efficiency, with the high performance building, they based all their stuff on ASHRAE 90.1 2004 is what they wanted your building to be designed against. You had to be 20% better. Every time the code adoption went, the efficiency required would meet that without even considering it. Now we went from 2004, now we're in 2021. The efficiency change from 2004 to 21 is almost 100%. You used to design classrooms for almost 2 watts a square foot. Now they're like 0.7 in that range. So you think of the lighting going down. Everything has changed dramatically. So achieving these, and technology's changed, so it's not a stretch even to meet these codes. But what you're used to what you're now is completely different. To kind of go on this thing, central plant, a boiler and air-cooled chiller. And some of these I'm putting on here for efficiency and thinking about the maintenance staff of the school. After talking to the team on Wednesday, these guys are pretty proficient on what they can do for maintaining their building, which is very unique for a lot of townships, towns. So I thought that was very good, but I still wouldn't want to put something in there that's going to require maintenance that's over the top. So something like cooling towers. I do mention up here tower boiler heat pumps. That's if you don't go geothermal and you still want to use a heat pump type approach. You can do a tower boiler. The difference is you just have a gas fire or electric boiler in and a cooling tower to help with projection during the summer. But your EUIs are not bad, 30 to 35. Your best approach in a fossil fuel base where you have a gas-fired boiler and an air-cooled chiller is chill beams. Why is it better? Few less moving parts, smaller ductwork. You don't have large air handlers pushing on a lot of fan energy out, so you can drop all that fan energy out and really reduce your overall energy use intensity for your building of a 28 and 32. Trying to get down to very low EUIs, below 28, 27, 26 with fossil fuels is really not achievable, okay, in buildings. And it doesn't provide you with the best rebates from Eversource that they'll offer you the best monies. And we'll talk about that a little bit. So just just comparing these options here. Indoor space. Chill beam requires the least amount of indoor space because it's most of your energy is transferred to piping with water through piping. Piping is smaller versus ductwork in a traditional VAV or rooftop system. So it's definitely a savings there, and it's one of your most energy efficiency. It doesn't have a lot of maintenance because chill beams themselves have no moving parts. They're in the ceiling. Occasionally they may require some vacuuming, but not on a yearly basis. It's very little maintenance, and they're out of sight. They're in the ceiling, but they don't take up any floor space. It's a good option and very flexible. Can be downsized to smaller. You can put in a smaller office and very scalable in the building. Even in high populous areas like cafeterias, they also can be used, but it wouldn't be something I'd put in a gymnasium. Okay, for that. So these are ranked from energy efficiency down, the best energy efficiency down to the least efficiency with this gas-fired rooftops, and then the different maintenance and costs. And I'd have these verified by O&G, but this is pretty consistent with what we've been seeing as far as different options.
And even the low efficient energy efficiency is still very efficient.
Well, it's better than code.
Yes.
No, the low efficiency has a high use intensity before, but it's only has one light bulb for energy efficiency. It's not as good as the ones above, okay?
Would you be expecting a mixed bag of things that this space requires? Is better served by this, classrooms are better served by this, another space? Would you expect something like that, or?
The only thing that would really change is your big populous areas versus your classrooms. Your classrooms, chill beams can be applied across the entire spectrum. I wouldn't recommend it for the gym. And the cafeteria is one of those trade-offs, depending on what kind of finishes or looks they want, the ceiling wants to have. That may not be appropriate for there too. I wouldn't put it in the kitchen. Okay.
So what does the chill beam require? I know it's inside small, but what's the head end of it?
There are about 5 to 8 slides that specifically
Show
describe.
some pictorials of them. Okay.
The cost column, what's the magnitude of one of the boxes?
No, this is just general for, in ranking of how much they cost.
How many bags of money?
Yeah, that's
Right,
right.
exactly.
It's not a dollars per square foot or anything like that.
It's 2 mils. for
Right,
taxpayer.
right.
It's not
Two meal tickets.
Why is the chill beam so noisy in the space?
Why is it noisy? Well, it's only noisy if you have too much velocity going through your nozzle. Oh, where it is. It can be depending on how the beams are sized. Compared to a centralized VAV, you can have that very quiet. But it's just, I was trying to say which one's more than the other. It's not going to be something that's noticeable. We have to design to meet the ANSI standard, which is 35 dBA or less. So it's not even going to be perceivable. I'm just generally ranking it where it could be, because the nozzles are kind of high. You may hear a little hissing sound, but it actually it's drowning noise within the space. It's like white noise.
So Chuck's question though, so those are sort of force ranked as 1 through 4, they're not necessarily twice as efficient as.
That is correct, that is correct.
That's what he's getting.
Good
That's what that means, yes.
Yeah, I get it.
That's correct. Yeah, you couldn't say this one is, because you look at the EUIs going from 40 to 25, there's not a 100% change between the two. It's just a value, it's just a total.
If you're talking about multiple systems though, for, like you could have the chill beams in the gym or whatever, is that taking up more space for the actual like housing of the mechanicals if you have 2 different systems versus one for the whole thing?
Not necessarily, because if you're doing chill beams, you're going to have 1 or 2 dedicated outside air systems that are going to feed air to the chill beams through ventilation. So they're going to take the space. Now, if we have to put package units, indoor air handlers, or say rooftops for a gym, it could if they're inside. If they're outside, it may not take up any more space within the building itself.
So in terms of like the building itself, is there one that's better where it's not taking up more space for like your spaces, architects, where it's all on the outside and very little on the inside versus?
Yeah, well, any one of these things can have a lot more equipment on the roof, but it all depends what we're going to do. Again, we go into goals if we're considering PDEs or things like that, and we want to be considerate to what may be on the roof. But yes, we have options going inside or outside. Some people like it because it's easier to maintain inside, but if we're struggling for square footage, we may want to put them on the roof because it's simple. You don't lose performance.
Well, that's what I'm getting at, is like if one may be a little bit more expensive to do, but it's going to buy you extra square footage where you can squeeze in larger room, cafeteria, whatever it might be, then that'd be better.
Yeah, we have to balance that out.
You'll see it on the next, the electrified versions. There's one that is a floor plan space hog that we'll talk about
Yeah.
in the next slide.
Yeah. So electrification alternative. This is getting away from fossil fuels 100% and going completely carbon neutral. Okay? Basically the same system approach that I described a little bit with chill beams, rooftops, etc. can be applied with an all electrification type approach. But these here are looking at using geothermal as your base source of heat rejection. Okay? Drilling wells, using the ground as a heat sink for rejecting or absorbing heat to the ground to transfer to compressorized equipment within the building. Whether it be air-to-water heat pumps, water-to-water heat pumps that will create either hot water for heating or chill water for cooling. And that chill water and hot water can be used to distribute through chill beams or VAV type approach systems, air handlers, as well as to your DOAS. Or if we go ground source heat pump, which takes care of the geothermal water directly to the piece of equipment on a unitary basis, and using them on either ganging up classrooms or individual approaches to provide heating or cooling as needed by your spaces. The key here is your EUIs, and from experience, many schools and where many projects done all over the place, the difference of the energy use is dramatic over a fossil fuel-based system. And the main reason is because with heat pumps, anytime you're using geothermal, for one, you don't need moving parts of the ground. You only have a pump that's circulating water, that's all you're doing. When you're using water to go to a compressorized piece of equipment, you get a more energy out of the piece of equipment than you're putting in. So the COP, coefficient of performance of a heat pump, is 4 to 1. What that means, for every unit of electricity you put in, you get 4 units out. Compared to like if you had electric resistance heat at your house, for every unit of electricity that goes in, you only get 1 unit of electricity out. There's no efficiency. It's 100% efficient per se, because 1 to 1, but it doesn't gain you any more, where a heat pump can give you 4 units out versus that 1 in. So that's why you see ground source heat pump, EUIs from 17 to 25 are practical, believable, and proven. As you get away from that, chill beams, 21 to 25 still in that same range, just not as good on the low end. Water to air VRF, that is not even going to be discussed any further. According to the town facilities, they do not even want to consider it for any school project here. They have nothing but, not so much experience, but they haven't heard anything good, so they don't want to consider it in any of their school facility buildings. So we're going to present that to you this way. We don't have any problem not designing it because we can design alternative other systems. But they just, from what they've been dealing with and talking to other schools and other people, they just do not feel comfortable with that being something they like to see in their school buildings.
Like ground source heat pumps, is there like diligence that has been done at the sites that makes them a good candidate for that, or is there something in the soil exploration that needs to be done to understand that?
For every project that uses a geothermal approach, it is highly recommended that 1 or 2 test wells be done per site. What the test well does will give us the geology of the site, give us the thermal conductivity of the ground, so we can right size a well field. It also can give you the depth of where the bedrock is, which can, during bidding, can give the contractor how much casing he has to provide. Because if you just kind of wing it, based on just what you know from around here, the depth of rock changes from town to town, area to area. They're charging between $35 and $40 a linear foot for casing. So if you say to job, I want 60 and they got to go to 100, you're going to pay $40 per linear foot over that 60 for every well that they drill. That can add up to a substantial amount of money as a change order to the project. So getting test wells is very important.
So knowing that ahead of like saying, yeah, that's the one who has the best EUI, is you got to understand what the number of wells that you would need and the depth that it would be, because
Yes.
it could very easily be multiples of the cost of the other.
Yeah, there's rule of thumb ways to do wells. That's not the right way to do the design, because you could over design your well field. But again, you want to be cognizant of what's necessary, and you don't want to be paying extra prices if you don't guess right. But getting the right thermal conductivity, right size well field, there's programs out there that we use to put all that data in there, and we play with the depths of wells as we need to. So we don't have to drill a 495-foot well, maybe it's 450 feet. Because that extra, if they're charging $20 a foot on a well and you're putting 60 wells in, that adds up. Okay.
So just for reference, we're working on a project together for an 87,000 square foot school. 72 wells are contemplated for the geothermal well field. And some of the data that we're getting from the test wells is going to dictate, as Craig had mentioned, what the depth of those wells are. Correct?
Yeah, we're sized that well field just based on practical knowledge without any tests. So we have a test well from that town from another project that's being done. We've actually used that as a basis, and we've already found we can actually possibly reduce some of our wells already. We just need to get the final data. So you enhance it during the design once you get that information.
Do the test bore holes that you're doing for the soil, will that give us some guidance, or two different depths of scale?
Two different depths. What the geotechnical information is gonna do is tell us what our soil bearing capacity is for the building structure, whether or not we need to over excavate underneath the building foundations and slabs, whether or not we need to do water mitigation or subsurface water mitigation, that type of stuff. What we're talking about here for the geothermal is strictly thermal conductivity of the wells.
Yeah, we have them drill a 495-foot well. They'll actually put a U-bend down in there and they'll grout the well. And then they'll hook the U-bend up to a machine that runs for 48 hours, where they actually use an electric resistant element to pump heat into the ground, and they see how the ground reacts to that over a 48-hour condition. And that information is plotted, calculation of thermal activity is prepared, and that's what we use for our data for sizing our wells.
There's sometimes where you dig that 490-foot well and say geothermal's not for you, like, I mean,
It's very rare.
mhm.
If we had open wells, maybe, but we won't design an open well.
Right.
Okay, open wells are usually 1,500 feet. We designed 3 of them at Yale, and we did 3 test wells, and we got a 0 drop of water, 3 wells. They had to manually fill the wells in order to make the system work.
So they became closed wells?
No, they're still open wells, but they actually have to have an injection to keep the water as they lose water. It works, but it just wasn't what they wanted.
But that test well can be incorporated into the.
That's the other thing.
Right.
When you do your test wells, you put the test well where your field wants to go. That money you spend for the test well is not lost, because that well then is reused and regained in your field for your project.
Should we just, if we end up going with a geotech system, do you think somebody could give a 5-minute, here's geothermal for dummies, what you're gonna be getting and what it's saving us on the other systems?
Well, if you look at it from a cost perspective, we can actually, like O&G can prepare it, but there was money put in the project to support this if we want to go that way. The cost of wells are all over the place these days as far as who you get for a driller. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, the wells are expensive.
Forgive me, I guess what I'm saying is, most people are familiar with an air conditioner, for
Correct.
that terminology. Not everybody, or at least not me, is familiar with geothermal and what that does and how it works and how it interfaces with other systems and how they're reduced or how other things are increased in that. And that's what I'm saying, is just, if we make that decision, if we could talk about it not so much from the theoretical, but from, hey, this is what it's gonna have as an impact on New North End, and this is what we're talking about.
I can do that in like 30 seconds. So you have a boiler, the boiler produces hot water, right? Your ground has energy in it. And you have a compressorized unit. And the way a compressor works, it either rejects heat or it absorbs heat. So when it's in cooling, the compressor gives off heat. It rejects that heat to the ground, so the ground can absorb that heat, thereby sending back cooler water to remove the heat from the compressor. Then you can get your cooling air or water going out for air conditioning. Then you reverse that cycle for heating. The compressor actually absorbs heat that comes out of the ground into the compressor and rejects colder water back into the ground, so the ground can absorb that, reject it to the ground, and the cycle continues. Then you can produce heat, because the pressure actually puts its heat into the building instead of into the ground. The difference with the ground is it's a ground coupled loop system. It has no moving parts. It doesn't require a fan, doesn't require makeup water, doesn't require any type of chemicals. It's basically a passive system that's just there for pretty much everything.
Is there still a boiler in the building?
You do not need a boiler if you go geothermal. Nope. You're producing heat using compressors. So that's your heating and cooling method. We can also produce hot water for your domestic use.
So is the hot and cold measured in tons, just like you would?
Still measured in tons. The difference is your temperatures that you work with are less than a boiler can produce. A water-to-water heat pump can only produce around 125 to 130 for building heat. For domestic, we can produce up to 160 to make domestic water. So that's your difference. You design to lower temperatures. But you got to think about, when you go fossil fuels, the energy code now requires that you run low temp water systems in your building. So you're doing that anyway. You have to run condensing type boilers if you have gasoline or propane. you can't have more than 120-degree return water coming back from your system to your boiler. And if you have an oil-fired boiler, they don't like that because if you have less than 140, the boiler will condense. It's not good for an oil-fired system. So the Energy Code is driving some of our decisions, okay, and what we're doing, which way we're going. So these are all good questions. Feel free, please. Same thing with the decarbonization. The ground source heat pump is the most efficient. The project that Justin mentioned, we're looking at an EUI around 24.5 right now. And the reason the EUI is high is because of the kitchen at this point in time. It's one of the biggest loads in a building is the kitchen. It exceeds the amount of energy your building required to heat or cool your building. It comes out of an all-electric kitchen. But it's something to consider when we look at this thing for balances. Okay.
Right.
What's that?
Fluffy numbers.
Well, no, I understand that, but we're finding more and more the kitchen is a big driving force when you go to an all-electric type environment with electric ovens, induction cooking, big booster heaters for the dishwasher. It's a big expense. And, you know, decarbonization is not, it always could be a balance. You can have a gas-fired approach with a geothermal building heating and maybe save energy on your kitchen side. But, you know, it's all comes down. So this is an important note. What costs more, fossil fuels and all electric? What I mean by this is not so much on installation, but more on operation. You're all aware, you all paid the utility rates from Eversource 24 cents per kilowatt hour this, you know, the last 6 months. UI was 30 cents all in kilowatt hours for a project we had down in Haven. So all electric bills necessarily don't cost you less to operate unless you couple them up with the PV. We don't know what's going to happen with fossil fuels down the road. Is the cost of gas going to go through the roof? But the efficiency of condensing boilers is very good. And if you compare gas to electric, gas right now still blows electric away based on current utility rates, unless you couple it up with a PV system. Then you're basically getting free energy, and it offsets the cost of what you pay, and you get a better system, and it makes decarbonization very attractive. Okay, that's what I want to point that out. So ground source heat pump, you're asking, this is kind of a couple different looks at what they are. The unit on the left is a water to air heat pump, which basically sends out hot or cold air to heat or cool your spaces. The unit in the middle is a water to water heat pump that uses your geothermal to either create chill water or hot water to be used for cooling through multiple types of chill beams, fan coils, air handlers, etc. And then on the right is a water-cooled VRF system, which we're really not going to explore. Geothermal also gives us an option to use water-cooled equipment in your kitchen. So your freezer and cooler can be water-cooled as well.
So is the unit on the left the one where every 3 classrooms or so
Yes,
you would need
that's
that?
correct.
So,
Is that like it's a closet or something?
yeah, so,
Could be. We'll show you that shortly. Yeah.
oh, okay, that's coming up?
Yep.
Okay. Yep.
So here's the closet approach. So within the dark box is a mechanical closet. There's a water to air heat pump in there, and that is serving two classrooms at a time here. And basically, if you have some residential system, you have a zone damper system in your house, where you have a couple thermostat, and the dampers will just open or close to allow heat or cool to go to one floor versus another. That's kind of how this works in a smaller environment. But this type of condition takes up some physical real estate out of the corners of 2 classrooms in which you get the equipment. And the equipment is serviced from the corridor and not from the room, so you don't have to go inside the classroom to do the service. That's one approach. Then there's a decentralized approach, which is what you see here. The mechanical room is actually built in the corridor of the classroom pod, and it serves multiple, the lower wing are pre-K classrooms, and that's it's kindergarten classrooms. So one heat pump will serve those 3 classrooms, and the other heat pump will serve the classroom on the other side, but in this case, there's no loss of real estate within the classroom, but real estate was lost within the volume of the school under that approach.
It's real estate. It's
real
space
estate
that you have to build.
It's one way or the other. It's in the classroom or it's outside the classroom. Typically, putting these things above the ceiling is an option, but they can't go above the ceiling of the classroom because of noise. Ceilings above the corridor, there would be deeper cavities, and then maintenance becomes a nightmare when you have to go above the ceiling. So it's not practical to do that, although it can. In that particular picture, there is one unit above the ceiling in the corner there by the exterior window. That's the only one in that entire project, but it was because we ran out of floor space. So that's just what this means when you do that. You can also create bigger mechanical space and put a bunch of them in there, and then now running a lot of ductwork around. It's just a matter of what you do with real estate within the building. These units can't go outside in a water-to-air approach.
They wouldn't go in the basement, they have to go on the classroom floor level?
Oh, no, they can go at different levels, but we typically don't build basements in schools. Every single space is occupied for something. But yes, if you had that approach, that could be done. Some old schools, like Manchester School, they had a five foot crawl space underneath that entire project. All the heat pumps went in that crawl space, didn't take up any real estate on the floors at all, but that was an existing building, and it had that there. So if it's available, yes, but typically, you don't see too many buildings built that way to accommodate something like that. Doesn't mean it can't be done,
If you had to have one of those heat pumps in multiple rooms, you're saying like one would do 3, maybe 4 rooms.
but yes.
Not a lot of running of pipe back to the ground source, or?
No, the piping is actually cheap. It's your ductwork that gets more expensive, because the further you bring them away from the space, it's more ductwork you have to put in. Piping is the least expensive thing. You can move a lot more energy through a piece of pipe than you can through ductwork. So a 1-inch pipe can move as much energy as an 18 by 18 duct. An 18 by 18 takes that much more real estate, and it costs more to run. Okay. Package rooftops. Again, this is your cheapest cost usually. Usually goes to a variable air volume approach. You can do packaged DOAS on a roof like this and feed chill beams, something similar. But what VAV does allows you to have individual control on an individual space, fed off a larger, more centralized type equipment. There's a lot of schools that still do this. It's not one of your most efficient approaches. BRF, we're pretty much going to pass on this because the facility really does not want us to explore this. Not much more to say on that. I didn't present this for the school. This is a air-to-water heat pump, which is coming really hot to the market now for decarbonization. What this does, it takes ambient air and uses that air to create either hot water or cool water with compressors to deliver heating or cooling to the building. The problem with these things in our climate is they're not very efficient when it gets cold outside. So this particular one is 100% capacity down to 17 degrees, but as you go down, it's only 30% at -20, it's 65 actually, but the temperature of the water is only 86 degrees. So as the temperature of the air goes down, the temperature of the water goes down. And what that also means, you have to put a lot more of these modules in to make it the same capacity as you would as a normal system. So this is very expensive, not very practical, and sometimes you have to couple these up with electric heaters, electric boilers, in order to get your temperatures up to make your building heat. So I have not been a fan of these yet. We're doing a lot of these in New York City because we have to. But we're coupling them up with our electric, so it's not as efficient. I'm still not recommending for a school environment at this stage. Okay. Chill beams. I'm really liking the chill beam option because of, one is reduced maintenance. It's not much utilization within the space. It's above the ceiling, so you don't lose floor space. It can be quiet. But if you look at the CFDs done here, the red being for heating and the blue for cooling, does a very good job of mixing within the space to provide good thermal comfort on an even basis. That's what nice thing about them. Plus, again, they have the ability to heat and cool. You can change from one source to another at any time, as long as you have a hot source available. But they're very good for giving you overall thermal comfort range within the entire footprint of your floor space.
And they don't require power?
These don't
There's
require power.
There's no moving parts?
No moving parts. The moving parts is a control valve that gets the power, and we use a variable area volume box to control the amount of air that feeds this. So when the room is unoccupied, we shut it down so we're not putting air in that we don't need, so we can take advantage of using it in other spaces of the building.
There's no fan at all in it?
No fan. These are
Where's the air come from?
air comes from a DOAS unit. So you have a centralized system that's sending primary air out, and that's what gives the motive. The way a chill beam works, it works on a dilution ratio. So usually 3 to 1 or 4 to 1. So for if you're putting in 100 CFM primary air, which is all your ventilated air that's already pre-treated, pre-cooled, and dehumidified, it puts air through a high-velocity nozzles that induce air across the coil, which actually re-engages room air at a roughly 3 or 4 to 1, back up through a coil, conditions it, and puts it back out into the space. So it constantly turns the air over to space, it reconditions the air in space for only, for no motive in here, but a centralized motive. Now, you remember on the walkthrough we did, I took a couple pictures. This is Brookfield High School, and Brookfield Elementary School.
Elementary school.
So this is the chill beam that they put in there, but that school did two things. They put radiant panels at the perimeter as well as chill beams in there. So belt and suspenders, but some people like that because it gives you the option of doing it. But instead with real tight envelopes, you can get away without even using radiant panels. The nice thing about radiant panels, they don't take up floor space. So it's another good option, but when you think about these, if you're using low temp heat in a building, so with water is only 125, radiant panels are not as effective as if you have 180 degree water. You lose the capacity drops quite substantially at low temp water. So it's really not a big benefit using overhead, where you can get all the heat we need out of a chill beam to do good envelope to do.
So one of the exposed unit that's on the left is a pretty good example of what supplies each of these. The insulated piping, which is in the white, is your cold and hot water piping. The silver duct that is up tight to the ceiling, that is your airflow.
Right.
So it shows you what approximate size, and everybody understands, it's been mentioned a couple times, DOAS unit, dedicated outside air system. So it's basically your air handler. So that provides the air movement into the chill beam that then distributes the hot or cold air.
You want a job as a mechanical engineer?
Yeah.
That was well spoken.
You won't put in the radiant panels, will you?
No, I wouldn't put in that radiant.
So this is another picture of a large environment where chill beams can be used. The picture on the right is actually what they call an induction chill beam. It gives you, it's a concentric type diffuser, which has a high capacity, which can provide you with a larger area, great for these type of environments. We have high populace people, where I can get the ventilation through there and get good mixing in the building. It looks more like a conventional diffuser than a long linear type beam, but it's still the same. This picture is actually chill beams in the center, the induction beams, and along the perimeter there's a one-way blow beams at the perimeter in that, which is a kind of a cafeteria collaborative type space in a very high ceiling. So the options are, they're very flexible. And then you can also put them in conference rooms, and there's a chill beam in the offices. So in the admin and smaller offices, these are very adaptable to smaller type spaces. And each of these beams gives you individual control to your environment, each space.
Now, with that limited amount of airflow, I mean, it's not a lot of airflow that's coming through. You're able to get the heat down where it needs to be?
Oh, yeah. 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 And it all works on, it's a Venturi effect. When you push air through a high velocity nozzle, the high velocity nozzle is creating the air motion you need and getting the air to the velocity that's necessary to make that chill beam work.
But you're getting high velocity with no noise.
Yeah, these things will all be designed for less than 35 dBA. Yep. Plumbing. From a geothermal option, this is with using water-to-water heat pumps to create your domestic hot water in storage tanks for use in the building, for the kitchen, for the bathroom, etc. This also has electric backup included in those water heaters in case you had a failure with the heat pumps or so. Just a little belt and suspenders, but your primary source is using the water-water heat pumps. If you go fossil fuel, it would be natural gas fired, condensing style water heaters to meet the demands of the building. From a plumbing fixture, we use low flow, but not ultra low flow. 1.28 gallon flush for toilets, 1 pint for urinals. Low flow faucets, 0.5 GPM, not 0.3. The 0.3 we don't feel give enough flow for washing. The 0.5 I still think is better to it. So they're still better than what the water efficiency standards are, but we're just not going to the ultra low. Even the facilities, they recommended if we would use waterless urinals, it's a function of preference. I have a bunch of facilities that they've taken them out because of if they're not maintained properly, what it can do to your piping distribution. If you don't get proper flushing to the piping, it can actually create crystallization growth in there, and it just becomes, it's not as clean, so we don't typically recommend them. But we talked about with facilities, floor drains and all the bathrooms, electronic trap primers to support that, maintain trap seal. We're not having, we can have septic on any of these? Or we have municipal sewer?
We have sanitary.
Oh, that's good. So that means we can put floor drains and all kinds, they can go directly to sewer. Next. Okay, I'm not an electrical engineer, so I may get beat up when I start talking.
How's he looking at me? Just
No.
that quick.
No, that's fine. This is again right out of the ed specs. One thing we learned that Cheshire has a lighting control system that they have in many of their schools. It's called Enlighted Lighting Control. They do like it, but they're not adverse to trying something else. But what they do want is the flexibility that that an Enlighted system offers, which means if they want to do global changes, they can go right in their computer, change all the classrooms at once to the same lighting levels. They can go and change individually if they want. So they want that flexibility still in a lighting control system that they currently have, because that's what they're used to. We also learned that in kindergarten, they have this, I forget the name of that term they use. Basically, the lighting in the kindergarten and pre-K is like drop-down spotlights.
Task lighting.
Task lighting throughout for, as a preference to general illuminating light in addition to, because it allows them to individual spotlight control at certain space in the classroom for the children. That's what they currently have now, and that's what they want to.
This is the Darcy program.
Yeah.
If you've been in there, they utilize the lower, the non-house lights, the task lights, as part of the curriculum, to indicate to students whether or not the station is active.
Yep.
Or not part of the day's work.
Right.
Greg, you know if the control system, is that sort of call it a neutral host, or does it require brand X light fixtures?
No, any light fixtures can be used. That's what we're finding out. It's really the control, it's the devices are typically common with the system. If you use a Crestron, you're using Crestron vacancy aux sensors, Crestron switch, the same with Lutron, you use all their components with their system if you use that type.
One more thing about the fixtures.
No, fixture doesn't matter. All the fixtures need is a power and a 0 to 10 and you're good to go.
So we're not locked into a non-biddable situation where
No.
all the light fixtures have to be.
And is there enough competition with the different controls vendors, lighting controls vendors?
There is, yes. We just got the whole idea is to control, is to get what we really want and not get the vendor that's gonna be the low grade, that's gonna give you headaches down the road with it. Plus, lighting control systems can be networked, and depending on the type of systems you get, if you have a fully networked system, it's more Cadillac, you get more money from Eversource too if you go with those type of systems. Maybe it's probably not necessary, just the functionality of what the facilities would like is at least what they have now, where they have full integration from off-site, they can change lights, change levels. And control, and
Can we back up a slide? So the bottom where it says emergency backup, is there a time when and you may have seen, I think this was probably already in comments you got from me in specs. Is there a time or place this could be brought up before it gets too far down the rabbit hole?
Yeah, right now.
Because I don't think that's a good approach.
Which one's that?
Emergency backup will be by a self-contained battery
I
ballast.
mean, individual ballast.
No, we're not doing that. We're not gonna do it. We had this conversation yesterday, we're gonna promote a generator with emergency fixtures off the generator.
With some limited batteries?
No batteries at all. No, the approach was no battery, no inverters, all through the generator. That's up to discussion. If you use an central inverter,
So that's what I'm asking, is when is the time for that?
You can offer that
Discuss with
anytime.
the decision makers, because I don't know that I'm actually a decision maker, that's probably a thing.
that, we didn't discuss lighting inverters with facilities. They
But it's purely generator, our emergency lighting is gonna be purely generators.
That was the intent, that's based on discussion, but it's open for discussion. The two options, if we have it, if we put lighting inverter in, the generator doesn't have to be classified as emergency, it could be just standby only. Because emergency could be done on there. If we have a fire pump, then it changes, but we don't know until we get the flow test back from that. But the generator should strictly be standby if we go with inverters. Inverters require their own maintenance, if they have to do it anyway. If you have a generator, we typically don't put lighting inverters in as a norm, we would just use the generator as our backup source, as a standard.
I might suggest it for like, accessible bathrooms and things to have batteries.
So, it was the specific facilities request to go DC on the sensors, but what you heard, right? Yeah. Or not, the automatic flush valves and automatic,
And they want hardwired, electronic for flush valves and sensors faucets, all hardwired, no battery.
He's talking about lighting in the.
Yeah, that's what but that's what you meant. You said
Oh.
DC sensor, what are you talking about?
oh,
DC sensor?
I thought we were talking about the
No,
control valves.
what he's talking
Flush
about
Still off the
is,
lights.
if
Sorry,
some,
still on the
I'm
light.
thinking the 10
I
second
knew- I know
delay.
that about
Right.
you,
The
Chris.
10-second delay for someone who knows that it's only a 10-second delay is only 10 seconds. For someone who's, disabled in some way, and you don't know, that's a terrifying 10 seconds.
well, even a child in a bathroom,
For a child.
the lights go out for 8, 9 seconds, 10 seconds, they could be a quick. And that's actually a great place. We have not done schools that way, but it's not a bad idea. It's something to
So
discuss.
one of the things with the emergency generator discussion, as we had with facilities yesterday, is there will likely be a discussion at the district and this level about what level of emergency backup we will have for the north end. Mainly because in the two areas of town, I believe your high school serves as a warming center in the event of a power outage, right? So that covers kind of the southern portion of the town. Whether or not we want to duplicate that, and I use the term warming center deliberately because if we start calling these things emergency shelters, then we're up to FEMA standards and blast walls and stuff. So warming center. There is a discussion to be had about whether the new North End Elementary School serves that purpose for the north end of the community, which would mean likely a larger emergency generator, more things on the emergency backup
Kitchen.
power.
Yeah.
Like, instead of maybe just covering the stuff for food preservation, which is refrigerators, freezers, we would actually cover stuff like kitchen equipment or warming things.
And domestic water, so baths we use.
Occupancy.
Yes.
Yes,
So they can use it as
It's a whole different animal when you start talking about
That's correct.
for occupancy.
Yes.
Then you're talking,
Yep.
okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad those are, because when I was reading through the ed specs, I'm looking at it saying, okay, well, we're looking at a 1.5 megawatt generator for,
Oh, no, yeah,
either
that's.
somebody just wants to make some sandwiches, or what's the real intent? So I'm glad that's.
This discussion was had of, full building versus partial building, and if for the other building, the generators, therefore, emergency purpose only, which is within the lighting, refrigeration, as Justin mentioned, if a fire pump is necessary, temporary heating, possibly leaving the admin online, but not for building occupancy. It's basically to get the building powered down and keep people out. IT though, 100% of IT on the generator. So those are the bare minimum that we put on there. And we talked about decarbonization. If you go an all-electric approach, you're not going to put an all-electric building on standby power. But the concern was for freezing. So when you have an all-electric building, what you do is you dedicate a portion of the generator to allow for heating and a rolling method. So you move around the building. If this starts getting too cold, you bring that system out a little bit till it heats up, then you move to the next area, the next area, the next area. So you can control that and not oversize the generator.
So one of the things you mentioned before were different systems for the mechanical. And if you're talking about an IT closet, if that's part of a large central system, you want that IT closet to remain active during an outage. You also need to cool it. which means a gigantic head end may also be, so are you thinking of smaller isolated systems for the IT closets so that you'll have a smaller load on the generator
Correct.
for that?
Yes, so it would have its own, each IT would have its own dedicated heat pump, basically. They don't need a heat pump, it's basically just a cooling unit, little mini split or something like that.
And we learned that there's no servers in there, it's just
Correct.
switches.
The load is very light in these rooms, based on what the director of IT told us. All the servers are off-site, it's all cloud-based, basically, which is good.
Which gets to the other thing I saw in the spec about the, how to get dry chemical.
Yes, that came up yesterday as well. Pre-action, if we put dry in, we have to have a wet system, so it's pre-action and a dry agent is what the request was yesterday.
Was the emergency management director as part of those conversations?
No, but they asked, they were referenced, so that will be part of a broader public safety first responder.
Okay, yeah, because our fire chief is also our emergency management
Yeah,
director.
yeah, he,
He coordinates the shelter.
yeah, his
He
name
can
came
tell
up
you,
at the
yeah.
warming center.
We can make him available for.
So I see, the pain with the chemical. and
No, it's
what we
fine,
would
I just, I
do,
don't understand.
it'll
How many
be,
schools have you done with that suppression system?
I'm a small, single.
we haven't done one. I can tell you,
Yes.
kind of just cool. I've
Well,
also,
we've seen
never
them in
done
the
one.
more recent ed.
I can't think of a, I mean,
But if we always start down this path, we'll put it in schematic, you'll price it, and if it comes to be, it's one of the first thing that usually goes, through as a group discussion. We just.
See how that worked?
That's typically what happens every time. So lighting is typically done on a zoning approach, multiple zones within the room. The bar there represents daylighting. So wherever you have windows, you have to have daylight sensors, which will dim the lights appropriately to the ambient conditions. Okay. One thing we want to talk about is switching. You go next one. So the light here in the light blue allows you to just dim the lights or shut the lights off where your teaching is, so you can see the video wall much better. But one thing to talk about, which they were interested in yesterday, is multiple switching in a room meeting. Just an on-off switch when you come into the door, and then at the teacher station, the control system that can allow you to change the level. They don't do that now. The levels in the schools are just, whatever they set them at is what they stay in. But they were not adverse to going to some kind of level control to give the teacher some flexibility to reduce the lights with a multiple scene type at the teacher station. I think that was a good suggestion. And then we talked about occupancy versus vacancy sensors. If everybody doesn't know the difference. The way the code is with occupancy sensors is now, if you have an occupancy in a room, when you go into the room, the occupancy will turn the lights on at 50% brightness. If you want them any higher than that, you gotta hit a button to turn them to the next level, 100%. If you have vacancy sensors, when you walk into the room, it'll sense that you're there, but you have to manually turn the switch on in order for the lights to go on. That's the difference between the two technology. And with vacancy, it can go right to 100%, but you manually turn it on. That's the difference. So it's whether or not you want them to come on automatic at 50%, then in operation to turn them to 100, or whoever comes in the room has to hit the button. So we don't have to ask that, change it now.
You're hitting a button anyway.
You're hitting the button,
You're
one or
hitting it because
the
you're
other.
pissed off because it's not bright enough, or you're walking over the room and turning it on.
That is correct. You're hitting the button no matter what you do. The thing with the use of vacancy sensors, this is the reason vacancy sensors has some advantage over occupancy sensors. If someone walks in just to put a piece of paper down on the desk and walks out, the lights don't come on. But if they do come on, they're gonna be on for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, or a half an hour with nobody's in the room. So that's the argument with vacancy for occupancy. Typically in offices, you use vacancy sensors because there's a lot of that goes on. In classrooms, I've seen it both ways. In the school we just did, they wanted occupancy sensors in the pre-K classrooms because if the little kids happen to come in, they want to make sure the lights turn on. But the little older kids, they didn't mind walking to a semi-illuminated location. But it's a decision. Sensors typically can be set either or, they're programmable to go either direction, most lighting controls these days. But it's a direction we'll have to have before this project moves forward, what the preference is going to be. Okay?
Are there any areas planned for time controls, like corridors and things?
Corridors, a lot of time controls. There'll be, and what we've been doing in most schools is putting occupants, allowing the occupants to work all day in the corridors. Or you can have time controls so the corridors stay on all day, but before 7 o'clock and after, say, 4 o'clock, they go off, and then you only come back on with occupancy sensors. We have the ability to work either way with you on that. Here's one that's new to the code.
So the vacancy sensor is just like an on or off then?
Correct.
Doesn't it turn any, you have to,
It,
it's not really sensing that you walked into the room. It's
Yeah,
not-
it is. It senses that you're there.
it only does something when the room is vacant.
Yes,
Occupancy sensor does something when the room becomes occupied.
correct.
So when you walk in and you occupy the room, it comes on.
Right.
Vacancy doesn't do anything, it doesn't do its function until the room is vacated.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, now it'll turn the lights off, but it
So
allows
if
you to
walk
turn
in
the
the
lights
room,
off.
it doesn't do anything.
Correct, you have to physically hit the button to turn the lights off.
The occupancy sensor
Or
does
it'll
two
turn it
things.
off on like a time you can set the timer.
You
for
can,
it to-
all vacancy sensors are programmable for the time you want off.
Gotcha.
Any time within the, you can do it.
And in my opinion, the occupancy sensors do two things when you walk in the room. Turn the lights on halfway, and they get you all upset because the lights are only halfway, you gotta go back to the switch.
Yeah, that's, again, it's new code. So here's where the energy codes have caught up to each other. Controlled receptacles. So within offices, classrooms, conference rooms, 50% of the receptacles within the space has to be switched. That means when the space is unoccupied, this outlet turns off, associated along with the lights. So, and what the code also says, you have to have, that's one of the things. The code says you also have to have, you can't just put them all in this corner over here, and they gotta be within each other, within space within each other. So you can get outlets, typically, half of it switched, half unswitched, for your spaces, and it is a problem. If people put computers into the wrong thing, they leave, the computer shuts off, right? So, but we can't avoid it. We have to deal with it, and, we don't put them in areas where you have a TV monitor. We wouldn't plug a TV into where it's gonna constantly go off, but within the classroom, 50% of the outlets will be switched devices.
And just so everybody knows for clarity, if you go back one, that's considered two outlets.
Yes.
That's not an outlet. Okay, that's two outlets.
It's one power source with different control. The top one, and see that symbol? That symbol is required to be on every switch outlet, so you know what's switched and what's not. Some people have wanted to go to color coded, so the switched outlet is this color versus the other. So, but all switched outlets have to have the device listed for what they are.
And the other option you can do, which you may want to do under a desk or something, is you could have a receptacle like that. It's not switched at all, but within 12 inches of it, you have to have
A regular out,
two
yes.
that are fully switched.
Yes,
So,
correct.
Isn't it easier to do an entire receptacle, the double, as either switched or not switched? In other words, can they screw that up when they're wiring it? Is there a way of screwing that up?
Oh, yeah, there's always a way to screw it up, but.
if it can be wired, it can be screwed up.
Yeah, I'm just thinking,
Yes.
it's like now every single one that's, this one's on, not, I guess it doesn't matter, because if that one's not
Because-
working, it'd be the
Well,
other
the code,
one.
the code describes, there's two things going on here. So the code says that for the switch, it should be the one on the top. Okay, they tell you the electric code, the one on top should. And also, the one of those two that is controlled is supposed to have those markings on
Right,
it.
so you know what it is.
And if you have one that is 100%, that marking is supposed to be on both. So you know the whole device is switched.
The reason they're doing this is to basically control with parasitic losses. Everybody plugs their iPhone and that little charger constantly draws a current, whether there's something plugged into it or not. So things like that, anything that's plugged into the wall is always drawing some sort of current, and that's the reason the push behind these things, so people just can't leave things plugged in, you're not gonna have that draw. But, in reality, that's why it's only 50%. If you wanna keep your computer, even when it's off, it's still drawing power. Right, there's always some kind of power in there, and that's the whole purpose behind this push.
And one switch can feed the entire classroom, or take care of all the outlets in one classroom.
Oh yeah, if you go to the next drawing, this is actually the control mechanism. So you have these two power packs, these are located above the ceiling, right? You have your daylight sensor and your oxygen sensor, vacant sensor on the left. You have your switches to control the lights, and the power pack on the right is what's tied into the switched outlets. And that's all tied, if the ox sensor senses no motion, it kills your power. So it's all part of integration to one system. And that's all the controls of the valve is all 0 to 10 volts.
And all of that would be a Lutron thing, or a
Whoever
certain
it's or
manufacturer.
Hubble
Okay,
or
yeah.
Crestron, yes.
As long as they do it all.
Yep.
They all have
Okay.
systems.
Yep, yep, very simple.
And the key is it's 20 minutes. It's when it's, I'm pretty sure it's 20 minutes. I don't think it's half hour, it's 20 minutes. So that's why you don't want your computer in every time you go to a meeting or something,
Right.
it's just gonna shut down.
Right.
Well,
And from a power outage, not even a shutdown, so
Right.
you're gonna lose whatever.
What's this? There's a generator discussion we were gonna have. We kinda had the generator discussion. I
No.
think we kind of pretty much dealt with everything. It's not gonna be a whole building. It's gonna be whatever's necessary for standby and emergency, and depending on what we do with the warming shelter, how big that's gonna get. Okay. PV, it's in the ed specs, it's something to discuss. I think we would, if we're gonna go all electrified, I'd recommend we definitely carry it and see what we got for budgets. If not, we make the building ready, PV ready, for a PPA or something in the future, as a benefit. It doesn't mean if you go use fossil fuels that you wouldn't use PV, because you still can't offset just your electrical uses in the building, even though you have fossil fuel support. Just means you won't be carbon neutral, but you're still doing something good for the environment and offsetting your electric. The only thing is, we wouldn't size it bigger than what we would project, because there's no value, because you don't get paid for electricity you don't need. Okay.
Do you guys design that, or is that?
We basically come up with the size and performance spec. We'll do the layout, performance spec, size of the inverters and everything, but performance spec it for a solar company to come in and just fine tune the different, we'll put the breakers, everything, we'll get all that, the pathways, all that taken care of. But then they just fine tune the performance of it. We don't do the attachments, we just make sure we have it in the project, and they would put the rest. And this, when you do a PV, you can get an energy dashboard from the PV provider that can show you your current production, daily, weekly, monthly, yearly, etc., of how your PV is doing. Again, it's an educational tool you can use for your students. You can have them do reports, because the teacher can get access, they can print out things and teach, and the kids can use that as a teaching tool.
Is it too early to ask if we would only be considering a roof, or if we would be considering other structures and a parking canopy type of thing with solar on it, or too early in the
You haven't
discussion?
thought about covered parking, have you?
We haven't thought about covered parking. I don't know if there was anything identified like the geothermal separated out in the budget for PV. I don't know what the town does, if they do PPAs or if they buy photovoltaics.
So it's too early in the discussion, it's not like that
We,
hasn't been.
we probably
Discuss
should
that.
discuss it soon, if it's gonna be a PPA. We have another project now where we're working with, there's like some consultant for the PPA, so that we can set it up correctly. So it's not too soon, it's not too late. Power purchase agreement, so they, I'm not sure it's like a lease deal. With
Yeah, so
PPAs.
what that means is.
So we don't own it.
You
so-
don't own it, and you don't, zero out of pocket. They do the full installation, all they do is sell you the electricity that's generated at a reduced rate for 20 years. Typically, the first 5 years at a fixed rate, and then it's escalated up 2 or 3% to the end of the term.
So that's yet another element of discussion, whether we want it, or whether it's ours, or whether it's PPA.
Yeah,
It
usually
is.
sorry?
Oh,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, usually the town has a direction one way or another, but
See,
I don't know what that is.
The good thing is, so if you look at that previous slide, that particular array was, for that school was purchased with the project. That's not a PPA. It was, offset by the state as part of the project, so they got a benefit for it. It was in the project budget.
What was the cost? Do you know?
That cost of that array, I don't know what it is. I know what the whole budget of school was, but we were budgeting somewhere around $250 to $3 a watt within the project installed. So, but the town owns it. Now, when you own, if you're a school that wants to do net zero and you want to put it in, you have to send down the RECs. You can't sell the RECs. You can't get the benefit of the REC, so you're just getting offset of energy in kilowatt hours is what you get. So, but they purchased as part of the project the whole array. The one in Manchester that did it, which was technically the first net zero school, Mansfield the second, they went with PPA. This is one of the most important things with driving goals for this project. Eversource has two paths for incentives. Path 1 and Path 2. Path 1 is a deep dive energy incentive which pays the most back to the client, but it requires the project operate at EUI of 25 or less. And if you do an energy model based on that and it proves out to be 25, they'll pay you a certain amount of dollar. If you, after a year, you decide to go, they'll pay you an additional if it actually operates at that value. So that gives you the best. Path 2 is still a deep dive energy, but they'll pay you less dollars per square foot for your energy uses, and they work that off the delta of a baseline building to what you get. The difference between Path 1 and Path 2 is Path 1 requires additional capital outlay by the committee or the town, which means you have to cost share with Eversource the value of a net zero consultant that they hire, and you have to pay 50% up to $10,000 to offset the cost of that consultant. They pay the rest, which is your cost shares. The client pays 10. The reason they do that is they want to make sure you have an invested interest in seeing the project through. So they put a little bit of burden on the client to achieve that. Path 2, there's no burden, there's no additional cost sharing. The cost sharing comes within the model, and they take care of everything. There's no out of pocket by the town. That's the difference between the two. But the difference is the goal. Path 1 gets a little more money, 25 EUI left. Path 2 gets you $1 less per square foot if you can be at just above 25. You can go Path 2 and be a very low EUI. You just won't get as much as Path 1 provides you because it doesn't go those next steps. That's something we need to talk about because I've already been in contact with Eversource, and they're waiting for us to contact them to see which way we want to go, because what required during schematic is for them to have a introductory sit-down meeting with us and the team, where we walk through the program, the steps, we get the MOUs prepared as far as what you need to do to sign to get the incentive process moving. We do the energy modeling to support that, but we need to make a decision which way they want to go. If you decide you want to go Path 1 and you don't want to follow up, don't want to do it, you can always revert to Path 2 with no out of pocket. But either way, we still have to establish and get that meeting set up before schematics are complete.
Is that a typo for the incentive cap?
Yes, it is a typo. Yes, it is. It's a lot of bit of money. Drop that last 2 off. I want to work back there. There's an extra 2 on the north. 4,342,000. Yeah, supposed to be 434,000.
We'll take it. Yes.
Yeah, I missed that.
It looks like we're doing it on Norton.
Yeah. So this is something we have to get going pretty soon, sometime in early July.
So do we or do we not need the commission agent?
I don't need a commission agent for that initial meeting.
Okay.
If we have them, that's fine, but it's not necessary.
Okay.
So that more or less is the bulk, or this is the last slide of the kind of building systems overview. So, any other questions for Craig? Any feedback? Any possible? So, among the things that you, I think, would like to get some feedback on, Craig, is direction, some of the reaction to the what I would call the mechanical system overview. Anything else that you would like to ask of these guys?
Well, I guess the real thought about is the project goals, really which way this project wants to go. We have an option of fossil fuel, hybrid, or all electric. And from a schematic perspective, we can write narratives to be looked at from a point of view. We've already done preliminary calculations to see where our EUIs, which are basically part of this presentation, of where they would fall, okay? For schematic level, we don't want to space roof over multiple different options. We're going to have it narrowed down to a few. I don't want to start with package rooftops. That's always something to fall back. So I'd rather work with, a boiler air-cooled chiller option with either chill beam. I'd really like the chill beams if VRF's not an option here. And maybe possibly a centralized VAV has a couple options. And then looking at geothermal coupled with chill beams and possibly air-to-water heat pumps, depending on how the building's laid out. But it'd be more of a narrative approach for you guys to put some of your pricing together at this stage. Each one takes up different space. The more equipment put inside, the more space we have to allocate. So we don't want to put too many options on the table, but we just want to have an idea of where you think you really want to be. What's the end-use goal? Like Madison had a goal, 25 EUIs, geothermal system, make it work. Mansfield said net zero. We want to make sure we're as low as possible, so it drove us right to one piece. This project, to my knowledge, it doesn't have that goal in mind. if we establish something, we can kind of direct you towards that approach. And that's, I think, is more important than putting all these different things out there on the table. I presented to you a lot, but different values for different EUIs, but we have to establish some kind of goal that we want to try to strive for and work in that, towards that goal.
Well, we have a goal in mind, bring it on the budget.
Oh, no, I think we can achieve that. I think we can.
Have you met with the Energy Commission yet?
Oh, the Energy Commission done?
Yep.
No, I have not. They may throw a wrinkle in things.
Yes, they would.
Yeah.
I think that's probably the first thing on your agenda.
Why would they meet with the Energy Commission outside of this committee?
They don't have to meet outside of the committee, we can meet together, but the Energy Commission has been here and at the town council meeting or at the Board of Ed meeting. Some members expressed a lot of interest in the project.
Talked about it here tonight at the committee, and there's none of them here, so.
Well, maybe they didn't know we were gonna talk about it.
And I think it's important, if, I don't know if the town has, certain municipalities have, say, listen, our buildings have to meet this, that's the way we're moving, right? I don't know
The
if
Energy
Chester
Commission,
has that, or,
they're not gonna dictate that,
okay.
but to Chuck's point, the school committee is gonna basically give you the direction. But without input from the Energy Commission, all we're gonna hear is feedback after the fact on
Yeah, because they weren't involved.
the, right, without any constructive opinions at the beginning.
I think it's just, that's just a suggested advisory.
Absolutely.
That
But
it really has no bearing on the actual design.
you're absolutely right, but I think that we owe it to the commission to basically, to have the consultants listen to what they have to say. Come back with suggestions based on what the Energy Commission puts in your ear, and then this group can, yea or nay.
Yeah, I disagree with that. I mean, as a building committee, we owe it to the Energy Commission to hear them out. They've been here a couple times, they've been at the other meetings.
The commission hasn't been here, members of the commission.
Members of the commission have been here, and it's pretty clear what they want. I mean, that's their charge, right? I don't think that they need to interact with our consultants on what we're doing. It's up to us to kind of take their feedback, feed it back to them, and give them direction on what to do. But I think you're mixing oil and water if we get different groups kind of dictating, getting in their how they want to get designed and everything, and then coming back here.
All we've heard until now is members of the public who happen to be members of the Energy Commission telling us what their personal hopes are. I think that this group, with or without the consultant, needs to meet with the Energy Commission and have a uniform approach to what the building should be like.
Yeah, I guess that's different than the Energy Commission meeting with.
And that's
them on
fine.
that. If we invite them to our.
I think we
meeting,
need to be
We
the
should
single,
invite them.
we need to be the single point of
Yeah.
contact for our design team,
Mhm.
is what you're saying.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Yeah, I'm perfectly okay with it.
I mean, sure, there's workshops and other things where they're gathering information from users, but that's different. To be honest with you, as important as what we're saying is from the Energy Commission, it really boils down. Vin Massiani is gonna run the building, I think his input is probably more important than anybody else's.
That's exactly what I was thinking, and
Right.
Jeff definitely has an idea as to how he wants his schools to be too, right? So.
Yes, Rich?
That
I
Rich.
couldn't tell if anybody was talking. You know, when we had a couple of members from the Energy Commission come, and clearly they're very interested in having a building which is as efficient as possible. That's their area of expertise and knowledge. I think we feel the same way, although we, as the chairman of the town council pointed out, also have to live within the dollar amounts that we have. So, you know, in my mind, yes, I want an energy efficient building, but I need to be able to bring that building in at the $166 million cost that, you know, we got through referendum. I think you made a strong case as I looked through this with some of the children systems and things like that. I'd like to take a look at whether, you know, there's any possibility for geothermal in the two sites. My gut tells me we probably don't have enough land or ability to do that at the Norton site, but maybe we do at the North End site. But, you know, part of my difficulty is, you know, you're asking me to set some goals, but I have no idea how much any of these things are gonna cost. So, you know, I need to get a sense of if we, you know, do this system versus that system, how much more money are we looking at? If we were gonna do geothermal, how many wells would we need and how much would it cost us to do it? So I need that kind of information. And from what you're saying, we need it fairly soon, so that we can, you know, make some determinations.
Well, I need to kind of say what I think about that. I think energy goals, getting not necessarily down to the ultra low PUI of 20 or 17, which is very high performance building, but somewhere in the mid range, trying to strive for that 25 EUI. And at a schematic level for pricing, we can have geothermal be priced. I shouldn't put words in your mouth as a cost estimate, but that can be done with just a couple of generic, whether I go geothermal with chill beams, I can still couple that up with easily a boiler and a chiller in chill beams. So now the only thing you're changing is the heating and cooling plant. And that's really, everything else stays the same inside the building, so that's an easy change. If we go to a VAV system, that's more of a wholesale change, but again, from a costing perspective, it's more of space proofing. We wouldn't space proof to that nth degree during schematic, but we make sure we can do it. It's whether we go rooftops or indoors, it can be done, and what you're changing again is the plant. So for us to put it in words to get price, because it's in a schematic level, you're doing more square foot costs anyway, and some high level versus takeoffs, because there's nothing shown at that point. So you have the option to kind of make a hard and fast decision based on budget after the estimates are complete, by only just looking at a few options under a geothermal and a boiler tower, a boiler.
You made a strong case, I thought, for a chilled beam system. That seemed to be what you were strongly recommending.
I am, yes.
Am I not correct there?
That is correct. With the flexibility, I think that's a better approach to, since we're not using VRF, to allow for easy to zone and maintain a building much simpler than going down to the ultra low with the air to water heat pumps.
I mean, I'll defer to people around the table here who have much more technical knowledge. I don't. But if you and the committee members here, or you know, engineers, architects, whatever, all say this sounds good, I'm more than glad to support that recommendation. And then I'd like to see, you know, if we went with a chilled beam system, you know, what other options do we have? We've talked about, you know, other possible add-ons or even alternates on a bid that potentially could be looked at. The one thing we've never looked at, which I think would have some impact on this, is if in the North End we had a system where we needed to bring a gas line in, how much is that gas line going to cost? It would be quite a distance and fairly expensive. So I think, you know, that may help drive the decision also. In the Norton School, you've got utilities already built in, maybe a different decision.
That's actually a good point, because if it's going to cost you $500,000 being a gas pipe, then it may be not worth pursuing that.
If it costs $500,000, then we've got $500,000 for our playground.
Or
You already have $1 million in that budget, right, Tony?
That may offset some of the geothermal if you go electrified approach. One other thing too, you mentioned gas, but you always have the option for propane too, from a gas approach, having a propane farm done as an option instead of having a gas line brought in. So there's different fuels that you can do that are still very efficient. That's a fossil fuel based system.
So we have $1 million in the budget for gas to support that project.
Yep.
So that's why I was saying.
Oh, I got you there.
There's
Sorry.
money already allocated. If it costs $5 million, obviously that'd be a problem. Is it possible to have pricing put down for a system that you recommend for schematic, as well as pricing if we go geothermal, and pricing breakdown, you know, say, hey, if you do this, this is another add. And an additional exercise to say, if we did some solar PV, this is what it would be, what it would cost us. Because I don't know about how we can make a decision on whether we want to go PV and without knowing what kind
No,
of.
I think you're 100% right, you have to get the total cost of the project. We know PVs are gonna be at $2 to $3 a watt, depending on what size we have. Now, the size of that array is based on the EUI of our buildings. So if we establish we want, anyway, any building can have an array, depending on the size you want, but if you don't want to offset to be net zero, it could be any size array. So if we go all electric and we want to consider, we can throw a net zero number and say, oh, our EUI is going to be 25. I can give you, oh, there's right there, 25, there's your EUI, is 30, where is it, 25, it's a 703 kilowatt array for Norton.
Right, but that may
Big.
not be feasible with the structure that we're building, right? You may not have roofs about that, you might need 3 roofs in order to accommodate that, we don't have that. So that's what I'm saying.
It's possible.
It's possible on a 96,000 square foot gross. Yeah, I think our footprint's around 60, so 50%. Yeah, it's possible.
That building I showed you had a 450 kW array for an 80,000 square foot building. And it's not a one-story building, it's one story then a partial, so it can work.
I get it.
Integrated
It
design.
can work, or there could be other things up there and shapes and architectural features that don't allow for it. I'm just saying, if we can have it, it would be good to look at it, or at least say, you know, you can't get this much, but with what you have for space to put it, you know, you can get this, and that should still get you.
You can offset something, absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I just, you know, maybe I'm speaking out of turn for the rest of the group, but I don't know how I can make any
Yeah, no, we
decision.
need some
Which
sort
way
of
to go.
ballpark figures.
I mean, how can we make how can we represent the taxpayers and make a decision with having zero
No.
idea what the information?
You're
I think I
100%.
like the chill beam part of it just because of the space that it gains in on the inside of rooms. I mean, you get more ceiling height, more window space. It's like in the middle range there of the EUI, and it sounds like it work at both sites. Like maybe you couldn't get the gas to the north end site, but you do the PV array on the roof there, and maybe it's fossil fuel down at the north. But you're same system, same type of system. It's just
I don't disagree. I think it's consistent.
it seems like it's
Like I said, it's schematic
loosely
level,
what you're recommending.
providing some options, having, and working with the numbers to see what's gonna be the right approach moving forward into DD. You're not gonna spend all the effort during schematic to lay everything out, so you have the option to move into DD to get that to work based on decisions that are made on pricing at the schematic level. And that's part of our job, to kind of present to you. We wanna just kind of give you the options that are available without any pricing structure, looking to kind of achieve some kind of efficiency goal. Hear what you have to say. We can come up with written narratives that can be priced for then an informed decision to be made as a team. You know, and towards the end, because schematic, you're pricing schematic before schematic is done, right? And you have, so there's some opportunities after that to kind of have further discussions.
So if I'm hearing it right, I mean, you're a design team expert for mechanical systems. You're suggesting that the chill beam is a good approach for the areas of school where it makes sense. It's a modern system. We've seen it in buildings that we walked through and toured. You've used it on other buildings with success. It's low maintenance.
Yep.
You vacuum every summer, put dust on maybe. There's just really not much to it.
About
It's
it.
quiet. It doesn't take up the real estate. I mean, I don't see, and I don't know that we really need to vote on this, but I don't see any downside to feeling good about your recommendation and to have you proceed the design as a building that will have the chill beam in. I mean, that's just my 2 cents.
We gotta have a starting point for some sort of mechanical system. So
Exactly.
that's the starting point. You see, it's priced out. It's all right. Then go back.
So we move from there, yeah.
Appropriate.
There you go, yeah.
It'll be one of our options we're gonna explore, both electric and fossil fuel based.
I don't think there has been any direction in the ed specs about being 100% electric, right?
No.
Right?
No, there's a line item to discuss, it doesn't say one way or another. It gives you the opportunity for fossil fuel and consideration for geothermal. That's it, there's no direction either way. That's why we're leaving it
Even
up.
with that, we're not saying
It
that
doesn't
it's
call for net zero either.
correct.
That's right.
So we're not gonna, well, I don't think we're ever planning to even look at net zero. I mean, that's a whole other quantity.
No,
Not far-fetched.
It's, as a, Mansfield Elementary School was one of the unique ones because it was bid before COVID and everybody dropped their drawers to get a job, right? And they got it for very low. Madison, there are some other ones that are out there now that's cost a little bit more. But we'll educate, we'll put the stuff down for everybody to look at and we make a decision from there.
I can tell you
The,
that, go ahead.
the town council, when they went out to referendum, set aside $1 million in each building for energy efficiency. I don't know how far that gets us, but my recommendation would be that you come back at the next meeting with a specific recommendation for the system that you think would be the best for us, that's the most energy efficient, that we can possibly fit within our budget, with maybe some options, and put it before this committee so they have something specific that they can look at.
With some cost.
We're not talking necessarily just your standard mechanical systems for conditioning the spaces. We're talking PV options or geothermal or what have you, correct?
Well, as I said, I think if we're recommending a chill beam system, and then there are some options, and we don't even know what some of those options are, something like geothermal may or may not be even feasible, and it may not be something that can be done cost effective. But you can still do a chilled beam system. So I'd like to see what the engineers and architects think is the best that we can do in terms of energy efficiency, in terms of a system that's going to be easy to maintain, that's going to be best for our teachers in terms of keeping, quiet, not taking up a lot of space, not making a lot of noise, keeping, fairly even temperatures within the classrooms. As I said, I'm not an expert in this area,
Understood.
but that's why we hired you guys to tell us this is what we think is the best way to go.
So the chill beam is the delivery into the classroom itself or into the rooms.
Yes.
The head end is different depending on which option you want.
Yes, the source of producing heating, hot water and chill water is what changes.
So
That's correct.
I think we're sold on the chill beam. What are the head end options?
There's really only two.
Yeah. Well,
It's a boiler and air-cooled chiller. It's geothermal with water-to-water heat pumps.
Right.
That's your two options.
so that's what we need to
Yes,
price.
and that's what we should price, because the gas is gonna require bringing gas to one of the sites,
Right.
and that's gonna come with a cost, which we can.
So that's the third option.
Well, no, right?
That's
Is,
a type of one of the options.
Right.
that's bringing, that's the fossil fuel option, bringing the gas to the site, so that's gonna come along, so that with the
Yeah,
boiler
that's
is gonna be cost A, and
Right.
then it's gonna be geothermal wells with the chill beam as cost B, or whatever number you wanna use.
Yep.
Because you have to look at them comprehensively, right?
Well, I think we need to look at the entire project holistically as well.
You do.
I think we
See how
need
it
to price, I think we need the time to price the schematic set, for the entire project, and then input different options for the heating and cooling systems.
But if you look at, but also if you look at bringing gas in for the fossil fuel option for that, and you say, well, that's gonna be cost prohibitive, we won't go that route. That affects a lot of other things in the school. I mean, this affects the whole kitchen design, right? So,
Yes, it
because
can.
if you're not bringing gas in at all, I mean, so the cost of gas is used
But
throughout the project.
nice thing with the kitchen,
Most of our kitchens, the last 3 projects have all been electric. All of them. And they're not net zero projects. I mean, they're
Right.
not,
Right.
I mean, they still have fossil fuel. The reality is, and I heard this
Really?
from
Florida
our,
cooking?
from our,
I don't like it, huh?
from our kitchen consultant, is the fact of the matter is everything that the manufacturers are making for equipment is headed towards electric, so they're having difficulty finding, you know, making the parts for the gas-fired equipment, so that's.
So we're planning for an all-electric kitchen is what you're
No,
saying?
we haven't had a detailed conversation with the food service group yet, so that's TBD. There's some clients that insist on certain pieces of equipment being gas. Others are fine with all electric.
Then again, you can do the propane.
You can do
right?
propane for a kitchen.
Propane.
Absolutely.
If we were going propane, we'd probably do propane for the kitchen and domestic water heating, if something like that.
Right.
Either way, we can, again, efficiency, take something off. Still could do geothermal without those loads on there, if we wanted to, without having, you can also have propane boilers too, so it's something to consider. We've done it before, we've done campuses where we put propane steam plants in for the campus, because there's no gas anywhere in the vicinity, instead of using oil, so it's not out there, definitely can be done.
What
I
about,
think with
say,
the
20?
environmental information that's been coming out recently, it would be short-sighted to put any kind of a gas stove or anything into the kitchens. And you've got entire states that are looking to ban gas ovens.
Or do we think it'd be harder to get replacement parts for fossil fuel run equipment 20 years from now? You know, it's a 50-year school, will they be able to replace the stove in 20 years if it's fossil fuel?
That's also something to consider, because you need bigger electrical service for electric kitchen appliances, and people gas in here, what you're feeding the appliance with is not the power you need to serve the kitchen appliances. So there's things like that to consider. You know, your booster here in your dishwasher, 56 kW versus 120 volt circuit, right? Your induction units underneath the hood, 50 kW plugs versus 120 volts so it's a big load change.
But first, we need a building.
Yes, we do. Yeah, we do. That's a good point.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a good segue.
So why is Justin here and not at the office working?
He will be after this meeting.
That's right, that's right.
So
So,
I thought you had this part done before I got here.
we were about ready to go to it, depending on what time you got here.
I live too close.
So, we have a couple of one more developed site concept, as well as some building organization concepts that we're gonna be going over with the working group next week at our working group meeting. So this is a conceptual site plan for the north end. Do you wanna go through this?
No, it's not bad.
Okay.
I like it.
So this incorporates one of the things that in particular that we want to highlight is, and because I'm in presentation mode, you can't see my cursor here, but you'll see the blue, the area at the southern portion of the site that is run by, one second.
I guess you can't. Never mind, sorry.
I think just Jeff just
Must do that.
see this.
Sorry.
Okay, give me 1 second.
I thought you could minimize that.
Oh. Your sludge.
Right there.
Sludge. Here we go.
Right there.
All right. So the area that's at the southern portion of the site that is run, the perimeter is the light blue line. That is the extent of the wetlands buffer at the site. So-
That's east.
Yeah, sorry, east, I would plan south. You're right, Dennis.
So this is the approximate wetlands, that's the buffer.
It's off road. 35 feet.
It's 100 feet.
No, it's 100 feet, yeah. You can build in it, but then you have to, we're trying to stay out of it.
Okay, because you still have to be permitted.
Yeah, if we likely will have to, I don't know, we're trying to do our best to stay out of it. If we have to grade into it, we're still gonna have to do it. Sorry, go ahead.
So some of the things that we're looking at is incorporating the feedback that we've received thus far, separating a bus and a parent loop as well as accommodating a certain amount of parking that is both for faculty and visitors. Also separating the early childhood program, so you'll see to the south of, which is to the left of the screen, we have a separate birth to 3 parent and bus. Yeah. So this is different than the site concepts that we had shown in our most recent presentations, where we had parking that was situated both at the western portion of the building and the eastern portion of the building. This focuses all of the parking on the western portion of the site, or the uphill portion of the site, which does a couple of things from an organizational standpoint, which we think are advantageous for the playscapes, opening up the possibilities for that nature trail that we know is an amenity at Darcy and has been referenced many times. Yeah.
So this green portion is all of the Birth to 3 program. So what we're trying to do is establish a pocket here where, you know, it's kind of protected and behind the building. The major move on this site plan from the original conceptual plan was that we pulled, as Justin said, we pulled the building back as close as we could. That white dotted line is the sewer easement. So that's kind of our stopping point from a building perspective.
What's that dotted line? I'm sorry.
There's a sewer easement.
There's a
Oh,
sewer.
sewer easement, okay.
Yeah, there's a sewer easement going through there. So the major move was pulling it back and kinking the building and trying to get with the acquisition of that property. This opens up a nice setup. I think there's probably a little bit too much gray shown there because I don't think we get as many parking spaces as what we showed, but it opens up a nice setup where the faculty, when we were meeting with them, they did not want to have, and what's nice about this is anywhere where you drop off in any of these 3 zones, no student is passing over a drive aisle, right? So there's a kind of a pedestrian walk greenway here where you could line cars up and buses up here, either vice versa, and they all walk safely to the building without crossing any traffic. So that was a big piece of it.
Any thoughts on the canopy?
Sorry?
The canopy, or no?
Yeah, when you zoom in, when we get to the bigger detail, we can show you that, but if you go back one more second, I don't know, were you done? Yeah, I think you.
I was just gonna reference that we are showing the approximate locations of some athletic fields, sizing on the site, so that we can begin to plan these incorporation. Yeah, obviously, this is a distinction that we're showing a more formal play area or sports field area than we have in the past, and separating that from some of the playscapes and nature trails that are towards the eastern portion of the site.
We're gonna have to walk softly on the play fields. It was a comment, the reason why we show it is it was a comment from town council, can we get some in there? I think we can make the argument on Norton that we're replacing in kind what's there. It's just, the state is gonna be looking at it as, okay, well, why do you need a baseball field, or why do you need a soccer field? We just need to be careful, because I don't think it was specific in the ed spec, we'll have to double check that. So just throwing that flag now to make sure that it's gonna be a dialogue with them, but it's, the reason why they're there is for the town council comments.
So one of the things, before we get into the floor plans, that you'll notice in the building footprint, and there's my cursor. It's nice of it to show up at this point in the third hour here. So one of the things that you'll notice is that there is a break in the floor plan here. We've had some significant feedback related to enclosed exterior courtyards. Now, as we've indicated in meetings past, one of the advantages of them is to allow more natural light into some of our curriculum spaces. So for that reason, we still think that there's an advantage to organizing a building around an area that allows us to get more perimeter lighting into our classroom spaces. However, in this layout and in the Norton layouts that you'll see, we have not made this area locked within the exterior perimeter of the building. There is a way to get into this area that we think plays pretty well with the site, and perhaps provides an opportunity for the access into it and greater use. We understand that the challenges that the district has with some of your current internal courtyards. So we want to make sure that we're making this a true usable space, so it doesn't become a desert, right?
Couple other things on that. So loading, so in the previous scheme, serviceability of like utility entry deliveries, that kind of stuff was a little bit wonky. We think, having it come on this end, so that the purple is CAF, kitchen, server, utility, electrical rooms, all that stuff. All the stuff that you don't want to see is on this side of the building, so it's pretty easy to get in there for deliveries. We're not necessarily implying that you couldn't cross this, like we've done projects where you could have multiple curbs, so that in the event that you have a large gathering or something, you want to use the whole parking area and have traffic flow in one direction, you still have that capability, but that's TBD in the set plan. So those few key pieces were also pieces that we wanted to clean up a little bit. And then lastly, to your comment, Dennis, that the canopies you'll see on the large plan, but the main entries are kind of threefold. You have admin out front with great views on the entire site. Admin for the beat, berth to 3 is right in this corner, so great access and views to visitors. But there's the entry here for berth to 3. You have an entry slid in between media and gym for this grouping that can come directly upstairs. We'll show you in another one there. So there's 3 access points that will help control some of the flow, because there's 790 students coming to this building. So
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if your bus is the one that pulls up next to Marion Drive,
yep,
and you have to walk all the way back,
yep,
and it's raining,
yep.
you're not gonna be too happy.
Yeah, they'll enter. Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, we've seen the buses, so at least at Norton, we've witnessed they drop and go. So they do like 4 at a time. Sometimes administrations like to kind of queue up the entire fleet. It depends on operationally what they want to do. But I get you. Yeah.
Drop off may not be the issue, I think pick up,
Yeah.
it's just, they lined up in a row.
Yeah, right.
Just something to consider.
Yep.
Will those parking lots be relatively flat, or what happens with the slope from Marion Road down to the school?
Yeah, so they'll be definitely less than 5%, and they'll be graded, so they'll be relatively flat. Yeah, it's fully accessible parking lots. We'll want them to slope. Part of the challenge, I think, site-wise, is going to be, the collection of storm systems. Where does that want to be? Because you're basically water's coming this way, so you got to kind of have to think through that a little bit better. And obviously, the surface kind of low, shallow storm is going to be far less expensive than anything subsurface. So we got to kind of think about that too. So that's kind of the next layer of this thing. And once the civil engineering and LA start really digging in. But good comment, yeah. So from a building perspective, left side green is berth to 3. That's the entry. Basically all of the required spaces, the smart starts, the SAIPs, all kind of work. So what really happens is your K and pre-K kind of are on in this section of the building. And it's a similar diagram to the ones before, where you could completely lock off, any kind of the public spaces. You have this layering effect for, this protected layering effect where you can compartmentalize different portions of the building, the educational, neighborhoods, if you will. We heard from the superintendent to try to group 2 grade levels together, so that's something a little bit different than the previous scheme, so that there's more opportunities to share if there's like a bubble class, if you have 4 grade 2s and you have 6 grade 1s or something like that, there's a little bit more flexibility. We did, on this scheme anyway, dot in where possible additions could go if capacity was an issue. I know there was some comments and concerns about that and looking at the fall projection, but anyways, building works with or without those. It's still fairly efficient from a footprint perspective. You lose a little bit of efficiency opening this thing up, but
What's the SNBO?
a small breakout, so
Gotcha.
it wouldn't be a room per se. It's a.
I was wondering how you got in the hole.
Yeah, yeah, it's just shaded that way, but we're trying to create like this node at the end of the hallway that's like a breakout space. You could have ITAB, small, seating areas for a class, half class, kind of like what you saw at the end of in Brookfield. It's starting like that a little bit. Toilets are stacked, and in the corners where they want to live, your special ed is stacked in where it wants to live in the neighborhoods. The core space, we did twist this around a little bit. So the idea is when you enter these buildings, these hallways, this space could be 2-story, and the same thing here. And we mentioned, I think Justin mentioned earlier that capacity concern about the cafeteria being pretty tight as far as the original ed spec. So we've kind of strategically located it where, and there's a kind of a dotted line here. This could be the cap, right? It could be an open space, and you could kind of count, this could be your circulation, and these can be all your tables. So it kind of cheats a little bit, but it gets you to the square footage. And then what's kind of nice is you have the opportunity to open this up to a nicely scaled space. You could have it open to a larger space. And then I think as we develop this, there could be something kind of nice about that as well. But pretty simple for the students to navigate. Go ahead.
Couple questions. 2 things I don't see. There's gonna be elevators in there, right?
Yeah,
I also, I don't see any real back of house closets for crate stuff.
Who needs electric?
He goes
light?
outside. So it's so we did. Well, I guess I pulled it in. We started putting at the corners is where we're going to want to put all of our MDFs, IDFs, electrical closets, those kinds of things. So they'll live, if they're not shown, they'll live in these corners. This might not be the most updated plan.
I get that maybe it's not that granular. I was just curious if that's maybe just not shown, or if you had a plan in mind.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely have a
I'm
plan.
not looking
in
at
mind.
this being a final layout with all the granular details.
Yeah. So to answer your question, the smaller rooms will be in the pockets. The elevator was there, I'm not sure. I guess we didn't pull the latest plan. And then the head-end service rooms, like we want to try to put our electrical rooms in all next to the kitchen, because that'll be the shortest run for all those pieces. So, yeah, those need to be, now that if we have a decent, reaction to this over the next week or so, this goes to the MVPs and we start looking at it from a layout perspective. And then lastly, sorry, I missed, so these are all your shared core spaces. We took the liberties of, so there's two music, of looking at chunking it up, the music practice spaces up a little bit more. We need more dialogue with the user groups on that, but you could kind of create a nice little, if this became a mini amphitheater or something, it'd be kind of nice to set up well with the music. And then visual arts has some nice access to, if they want to spill out and do, art outside, and then OT PT really wants to live near the phys ed. So they're all the appropriate sizes for the ed spec. They're all in the general decent location. The building sets up well for that layering. And I think it addresses the biggest challenge, quite honestly, was the courtyard piece.
Yeah.
Disconnecting the building room. And if you go to the, do we have enough of those? So, the upper levels, so what you could look at is having, again, when we start getting into detailed conversations with media, but you have basically first the 3 pre-K to 6 here. The collection, you may want to separate the collection by level. We don't have to, but this sets up well if you did. And then this could be, you know, story and a half or so space. So when you enter, it feels welcoming. Same thing here, you'd be entering down there, and this would all be open. And then these are just simply stacked. We'd have, you know, some stairs in the corners so that it's pretty efficient from a, you know, from a student circulation perspective. And what we started to do, I don't know if it's after this or is the next, the massing of this, we didn't get to the back half, but looking at trying to get some more, you know, farm-like shapes to the masses, at least at the front of the building. We can talk about how much it makes sense on the back half. You know, there's obviously a cost to it, but to make this thing befitting of you know, the site that it's sit on, I think is important. So that's kind of the direction we were heading on this.
What's that, guys?
Was that? Did you? Oh.
Interjoke.
Okay. So, yeah, we still got, you know, obviously a lot more to do, but I think this responds to a large majority of the comments we heard from faculty and staff. This plan is a little less developed because we finally got the final survey, but this piece, we're still thinking, you know, the parking obviously hereafter. We shifted the building over because of this pocket wetland. And some of the comments we had were that play was too exposed. If you remember, like kindergarten play was like right dead center. So we still need to obviously do the same thing that we did for North, but the plan has worked to a point where we think it starts to work well. The shapes, similar kind of comment to, so same program really, with exception of birth to 3. So you have like, instead of, you know, you have about, what is it, 12,000 square foot less. So it made for an interesting kind of tweak to that side. This seemed to work okay originally from when we had conversations with the fact they liked the idea that you could go in both directions. So this orientation is a little different than North, right? North had this turn, but we think there could be some interesting relationships here, and then we still have that relationship for smaller performances as well. So we maintain that. It's just, I think we have the added benefit on this one to really stack these. The other piece is, before if you remember, we had a program coming down here in 6th grade over here. And it made the building a little too long. We're still, I mean, these need to be kind of worked out some more, but we were trying to get the same thing. We're trying to get access to a courtyard, so it's probably not there yet, but so access, service on this side, utility, CAF. So you would enter admin, health, you know, nurse, you'd see all of that, dead on, OTPT, the counseling here. We can talk about whether or not this is the right program and maybe move something else, but these are the two special education programs,
Yeah,
PCA. Go ahead.
ABA,
ABA. Oops.
Applied Behavioral Analysis. So basically, those are the two spaces that were requested in terms of a parity of support services between Highland and this building. So it just so happened that the classroom module that works for this layout gives us the flexibility to provide that within this footprint.
It can be, it doesn't have to be. So we're testing the levels of patience of Ben and his staff. So it doesn't have to be, it's set up the same way. It could be open and not have doors, or it could have a bridge connector, or it doesn't necessarily, well, it does in this particular instance unless we put a stair there. So it's not much different than the arrangement we had on North. The difference is we're trying to get these things to open up, because if you could imagine, like that right side of that site's pretty nice. If we can get these to, if you study these plans hard enough, we're always looking, we always want to try to make sure that your views are, not to just a wall at the end of the hallway. And I think these are starting to work. I mean, we need to tweak them a little bit, but we thought it was kind of interesting because we heard more like, what did they say when they're treehouse-like, and they liked the site, and it's nicely wooded back there. So if we could open it up to see those views, I think we need to tie the architecture to that. So.
Is there a design reason that could just be aesthetics, but between G4 and G6, you've got that gap, and not making that essentially the bridge connector, make that a piece of the second floor, so you have overlook or breakout space, and then actually down below, if it is an open passageway to the courtyard, you've got a much larger enclosed area where if it's raining or something, you still do things outside. Or is there, I just don't know.
Square
footage. Square footage?
So the next pass at this is to measure these versus the OCGNR, or it's not OCGNR anymore, it's whatever, the state, we'll call them.
SFU.
Right, they renamed themselves.
And if you open up the passageways to the courtyard, is that square footage, then you go back into your first floor is.
That's, I intentionally, we showed one with doors and one without. The next pass at this is to kind of tighten it up to make sure it gets you closer to.
Square footage is down here.
Yeah. So I think this has similar yet, different, interesting kind of pieces to it. I think the ability to kind of see through this way, I think is nice, because that is also going to be woods, hopefully still woods remain. So if we can keep some of the natural features of the site when it's tucked a little further away in that top right, I think it could be, that's the more private side of the site, which I think is nice.
You go back to the site plan.
Mm-hmm.
What's the parking paired with the look like your picture top?
So what we had wouldn't likely change, other than, I think, with the traffic study. Do we have that slide, do you think, in this deck? The original site plan? Tested.
I will say yes. Yes.
Yeah, there's not a lot of wiggle room. With moving this over, we might be able to get a little more efficiency in this zone. What I'm a little concerned with, which I'm sure Laurel is too, is how much work, is over this building. So that's what really needs to be, I mean, it's possible, right, because the building will come down, but we're gonna try to get it a little further into the site. But- So it wouldn't be dramatically different. The only comment that we did hear, which might blow a hole in my theory of keeping it natural, was they wanted an emergency roof there, and
Well, it could go
could go
around, especially if this area ends up being part of a loading operation.
Yeah,
I think it would
we
be
could do that.
smart to have that.
Yeah. But I mean, I think the LA got a little bit overzealous. I would, if this thing's now shifted over and opening up, I try to keep those as natural as possible. But I can be wrong, it's not the case.
No, we were all chuckling at the overzealous landscape architect.
So, so we're pretty excited about, I think, the direction it's headed. I think we obviously gotta flush out a lot more detail. But, from a planning perspective, like stacking things, making things efficient, putting, from a mechanical infrastructure standpoint, I think it's the diagram's pretty clean.
Jeff, what's the timeline now? You've got, we're supposed to be accepting schematic the first meeting of August, so what's happening over the next couple of meetings?
So Tuesday, we have our working group on Tuesday, right, Justin?
Yep.
So we'll have flushed out site plans and a little bit more refined floor plans and a little bit more massing for those meetings. And then, it may make sense to kind of package that up and send that to the committee for review so that we can kind of come into that meeting with any comments related to the schematics.
Yeah, we're also assembling schematic design narratives as well to start outlining the bases of design, stuff like finishes, structural systems, all that stuff.
So to answer your question, where are we? So the next meeting, we're gonna have another round of more refined plans, site plans. We can talk a little bit more about building systems. We should need to talk more about the site planning, like where storm basins are gonna be, how much grading we're doing, those kinds of things. So that's what I think you should expect at the next meeting. And again, the refinement of these plans and the elevations and the look and feel of each of the spaces is gonna evolve as we go through the process. But looking at these plans, tightening up these plans and getting them from ONG to start looking at these things from a costing perspective, I think is getting closer.
We're still on schedule to approve the first meeting in August?
I think we should be fine, yeah. Unless people have a negative reaction to where we're headed, I think we'll be fine, yeah. We didn't hear a lot of feedback at our few working group sessions from the initial conceptual with all the teachers and the superintendent, faculty, and staff. So I'm hopeful that these revisions will be looked at positively. So the answer is yes, we'd like to stay the course.
Okay, good.
Any other, it's getting late, but any other comments? We'll make sure the electrical.
Okay, thank you.
Am I done with that? Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, do you have the pre-construction schedules? That's something you're circulating today?
I can, if you'd like it.
No, I know you'd mentioned maybe you're circulating and you could briefly look at it.
I'll give you a brief, just summary,
Yep,
and then
thank
you
you.
guys can all read it on your own. Take one and pass it
And we'll put that on the agenda for the next
Next
meeting.
time to give
Yeah.
them.
I'll just introduce the format,
Good.
and then you can study it all you want.
How's this where she says it's teaching the right players to protect glasses? You sent this to you, right?
No, I didn't send it to TechCom. No, I didn't. That's why they don't know they owe us something on July 3rd.
That explains
You may want to save one or two, like for Sean.
You can keep the rest if you like. So just to give you a high level, it's 6 pages. The purpose of this schedule is to try to get a path to us being able to start construction. So this is not a highly detailed construction schedule. You'll see on the very last page, I just have one-liners for construction. This is, the purpose of this is to get us there. The first page, we have milestones, so this is just 30,000 level, start work on site December 10th. That's the one that you kind of want to keep an eye on. That's driven from activities below. We have a section here about contracts, you know, who owes what for getting contracts on board. These are things that we've been talking about. So you'll see at the bottom of page 1, there's other services. You're on the commissioning agent. We're talking about the environmental consultant. There's other contractors, consultants that you're going to need to be getting online. So we're just going to start tracking those. And again, they're far out, so we don't need to worry about them yet, but we don't want to lose sight of them either. On page 2, we're at schematic design, so you see the little activities associated with that. I do have the August 10th meeting on there. And then it goes to design development, construction documents. It's keeping track of our, I still have OSCGNR, but it's keeping track of our meetings with the state. It's keeping track of any local reviews that we need to be considering. And again, this is just a first pass with the local review process, so that's subject to change. But again, it's everything that we need to do to get up to the state, get out to bid, to start construction. So you'll see we've broken it up between the 2 schools, between New North End, New Norton, anything that we need to do with P&Z. So as we gain more information and we need to start targeting dates and meetings, I'll update that accordingly. And on the very last page, you'll see, again, just the finalizing bid packages, when we expect to go out to bid, and that whole process. So this is just a high-level scale for that. So you'll need to review it and critique it.
Having to go to the Board of Appeals.
I do, I have that in here somewhere.
Yeah, you can go to page 5.
Again, this is pretty much a catch-all,
Okay.
so we don't forget about certain things, because certain things will hold us up from starting work on site, so.
Laurel sent that to me electronically, I'll fill it out to you, so you have it through your file.
And something like this, I would typically update on a monthly basis, and I usually like to do it the earlier in the month as opposed to later, it doesn't matter, but I try to update this monthly, so you kind of see where you are. And this blue bar will keep sliding to the right.
Good, thank you. I guess we have questions. We'll see you at the next meeting on it.
Yeah.
That's it there. And the last item, next Thursday, our working group, Chuck, Chris, Dennis and me, meet commissioning agents between 7 and 9. And we'll have a recommendation, and because the bids have to be opened in person, we're proposing a special meeting July 6th, Thursday, July 6th. It's probably the only item on the agenda, the only decision today, Zoom or in person. Whatever the committee wants.
I'm not available for the interviews.
Okay.
Okay.
Person's fine. Zoom is fine.
Zoom is fine? Okay. Zoom is fine.
I didn't hear.
Zoom, sounds like Zoom is the way to go.
The Zoom meeting, okay.
Right.
You just received an email from Sean, by the way. He said that 3 of the 4 RFPs came in with the pricing not sealed. So we called Jeff D'Onofrio, and they're gonna take care of that so that the committee gets the RFP but doesn't see the pricing until after they've done the interviews. So he'll get back to you as soon as those RFP documents can be
Not the
collected.
easy meeting next week.
Yeah,
Anyway,
okay.
I've got an email that details that whole piece. But thank you, gentlemen, for volunteering to be on that working group, and we look forward to hearing the responses from your interviews.
Okay, very good. Anything else? Otherwise, take a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Okay. We are adjourned.